Report with Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, September 1, 2020. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps and steps and steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, author, historian, Rick Perlstein. His latest, Reaganland, America's Right Turn, 1976 to 1980. Meanwhile, Trump heading to Kenosha, doubling down on his law and order campaign as Biden retains a polling lead. Speaking of Kenosha, the sole full-time black staffer for the Kenosha paper quits with the papers inciting polarization. Bill Barr initiates a nakedly corrupt DOJ investigation into Blue State nursing home COVID deaths. The EPA reverses and now promotes the dumping of toxic wastewater from coal plants. Days after the Directorate of National Intelligence refuses to give verbal briefings to Congress on election security, Bill Barr removes the national security official in charge of securing elections. Federal workers will get that Trump tax deferral, and then they're going to get slammed in about 6 months. House committee to subpoena Louis DeJoy over the Postal Service sabotage. Full appeals court allows for judicial scrutiny over the DOJ attempts to end Michael Flynn's criminal charges. And the new Trump pandemic advisor pushes herd immunity. And lastly, New York City teachers probably just avoided a strike. The school, or at least in-person school, delayed by 2 weeks. The biggest school district in the country attempting to have in-person schooling this year. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. That last story hit home, obviously. My children are enrolled in that very same school district in New York City. The in-person schooling is delayed 2 weeks. The start of the remote schooling, which my kids will participate in, starts a week later. And so I want to say that my endless summer continues. But this is, the whole COVID thing, I guess, is sort of like the... I don't know. It's the endless. I don't want to say it's like the endless summer because it's really not a summer. I don't even know what you would call it. Sort of just some type of like rolling nightmare.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, rolling nightmare, endless summer. I mean, they're both things. So you could maybe switch one out from another. The polling. Oh, I meant to pass on this little bit of potentially good news, right? You got to be skeptical, but that company Abbott, which made a test, one of the first COVID tests, which had something like a 30% inaccuracy rate. They are claiming to have a rapid test that will be available within a couple of months, widely available, for $5 that you can do at home, some type of nasal swab. I don't know if you have to go all the way up like the nasal swabs you get at the other testing facility, because I don't think I personally I couldn't do that to myself. No way. But and it's supposed to be a rapid test. It's $5 per test. So, I don't know what the accuracy is supposed to be on this. But if it's, if it's like 80% accurate and you can take 2 or 3 tests for $15, you can get a pretty good sense. And the turnaround time, that should make a big difference. I think it should make a difference, at least somewhat of a difference. So we'll see. But we will get to that in a moment. Let me just tell you, as you know, very stressful time for people. It's been particularly stressful. I'm not afraid to admit it that I have been leaning on CBD quite a bit over the past couple of months. I was never a fan or terribly interested, but we had a sponsor approach us, and I was like, I'll try it. And Matt can speak to the smokables, although they just sent me one of those, massive spleefs. I don't know what it is, CBD spleefs, because I showed some jealousy of Matt's. But Sunset Lake CBD, they are located in Vermont, just outside of Burlington. They are a farm that used to produce for Ben & Jerry's ice cream, family-owned farm. They diversified, started to sell hemp. They collaborate with the University of Vermont to implement regenerative agricultural practices. University of Vermont, I guess, is really big in hemp growing expertise as well. Their hemp is 100% pesticide-free. They only use organic fertilizers. You can see all the third-party test results on their website. Their minimum wage is $15 an hour. Employees own a majority of the company. And the stuff is fantastic. I've been using the salve on my eczema, and I don't want to make any medical claims, but for me, it's been working. I got the salve for a buddy of mine who had shingles because his back was hurting. He said it cut the pain. We've gotten emails from people saying the salve, helps people's arthritis. But basically, I use it to sleep. The tinctures. They now have a 3,000 milligram tincture that you just take a half a dropper, and it's much better than the Ambien I was relying on, believe me. But they also have gummy bears, 1,000 mega gummy bears, and they also have Farmer's Roast CBD infused coffee, which is both delicious and sort of oddly calming. But Matt, you can speak to the smokables.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the smokables go, I would direct people towards the smalls. They're nice, ground up little bits of flour nuggets that you can put right into your grinder. They fit alongside anything you want to put it there.
And I will say this: I tried one of the pre-rolls, and it is a weird experience because you do get this sort of like body high, but you don't get the sort of the mental high. I mean, I guess that's obvious. That's the whole point. But I never really experienced that before, because with the tincture, I just go to sleep. But folks, you get 20% off if you use the coupon code Left is Best at sunsetlakecbd.com. Sunsetlakecbd.com, 20% off with one word, Left is Best. Sunsetlakecbd.com. Check it out. They're a great sponsor. I love this company. I really do. All right, let's well, I don't know. Should we do that clip of Donald Trump? Yeah, let's do that quickly, and then we will get to Rick Perlstein, who has completed another just fantastic. I don't know if he would perceive it as an installment of, but I would, of like basically our modern history and the modern history of the right in this country, and we will get to him in just a moment. Donald Trump, yesterday sitting down with Laura Ingraham, who, and I just want to make this clear to you. She is the supposed journalist who is interviewing him, not his communications director sitting next to him, telling him what to clarify to the interview. There's only 2 people in the room, but she seems to be playing the role of a communications director, just because Trump, his ability to sort of understand the implications of someone being shot, it seems to be hard for him to grasp. Here is Donald Trump sitting down with Laura Ingraham.
St. Louis African-American police officer shot in the head and killed
Dorn.
last night. He's another African-American
That's true.
just killed yesterday.
That's true. Yeah.
That's
true. Killed.
It's more dangerous to be a police officer today, do you not think, than it has been in
the police
a long time?
Are under siege because of things. They can do 10,000 great acts, which is what they do, and one bad apple or a choker. A choker. They choke. Shooting the guy in the back many times. I mean, couldn't you have done something different? Couldn't you have wrestled? In the meantime, he might have been going for a weapon, and there's a whole big thing there. But they choke, just like in a golf tournament. They miss a 3-foot.
You're not comparing it to golf because, of course, that's what the media.
I'm saying people choke.
People panic.
Choke,
yeah.
And people are bad people. You have both. You have some bad people, and they choke. You could be a police officer for 15 years, and all of a sudden you're confronted. You've got a quarter of a second to make a decision. If you don't make the decision and you're wrong, you're dead. People choke under those circumstances, and they make a bad decision. I've seen bad decisions of people that it looked bad, but probably it was a choke. But you also have bad police, but you also, not only the vast majority, thousands and thousands of great acts and one bad one, and you make the evening news for.
Yeah, you choke. You choke
and you make the news about it.
But she fortunately stepped in and said, "Hey, I just want to remind you that you come off as a psychopath if you compare this to golf putting." Oh, right. Yes, no, but I meant choke. There it is. Donald Trump heading to Kenosha today, and we will see. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, author, historian Rick Perlstein on Reaganland, America's Right Turn, 1976 to 1980. We'll be right back. We are back. Sam Cedar on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome back to the country. Welcome back. He's still in the country. Welcome back.
I only wish.
Welcome back to the show. Author, historian Rick Perlstein here to talk about his latest Reaganland, America's Right Turn, 1976 to 1980.
Sam, I tried. I really tried, but they wouldn't let me in any other country.
I bet you.
I would have to quarantine for 2 weeks.
There you go.
Bad idea.
Well, now, all right. First off, we should just say this is the fourth in, I hope, what is an ongoing series of books, but it's your life. But Before the Storm, that was the rise of Barry Goldwater, Nixonland, and then The Invisible Bridge, which were sort of like the Nixon era and into sort of the ascendance of Reagan, maybe pre-Reaganland, and then Reaganland, which, oh gosh, I'm sorry, I got lost there for a second. And Reaganland, which oddly enough starts in 1976 as opposed to 1980, right? I mean, his Reaganland started before he actually even became president. But I want to start here, because the thing about this iteration, or I should say, I don't want to say chapter, but this episode of this history that you are recounting, is that like I was a teenager or getting close to there. And so some of this stuff, like, I was aware of peripherally. And so it was really, it's fascinating for me. But I want to start with this, Pat Caddell, because you start with Pat Caddell, and I had forgotten about Pat Caddell, but I had dealt with Pat Caddell sort of, 10, 15 years ago, quite a bit. Tell everybody who Pat Caddell was. And in many respects, he had an awareness of what made much of our modern politics.
Absolutely. So Patrick Caddell, to put it most bluntly, he was a pollster and a political strategist. But it's much more than that. I'll even start from the beginning. It's 1968. There's this high school kid named Pat Caddell. He's really interested in John F. Kennedy, and he's really interested in baseball statistics. He grew up in Massachusetts. Then his family moved to the panhandle of Florida, which is basically George Wallace country. And in 1968, he's supposed to do a project for math class, and he decides to poll his neighbors about who they want for president. And this, I guess, is kind of like early in 1968. And all his kind of cracker neighbors in northern Florida say that they either want George Wallace, the racist governor of Alabama, or RFK, the liberal Robert F. Kennedy, the liberal senator from New York, who went nose to nose with George Wallace in 1963 over school segregation. And this high school kid, Pat Caddell, says, what the heck is going on here? Why do the same people want this right-wing demagogue and this liberal for president? And he realizes that he has the insight that animates his political life and really, in a lot of ways, our political lives as well. He realizes that people don't really vote on issues. They don't study, what one politician wants to pass in terms of policy as opposed to the other. They vote when it comes to feelings. And the feeling they got from RFK and Wallace was that both guys were tough. They were going to kick the establishment's butt. And he goes to Harvard for college, and he starts a polling company, literally from his dorm room. He is hired as one of George McGovern's pollsters when he's still in college. And another guy he has as a client is this young 29-year-old kid who's running for Senate from Delaware named Joe Biden. And what he tells Joe Biden is that people are so mad at Washington. They have these angry feelings towards Washington that he shouldn't even mention the name of his opponent, or at least he should avoid mentioning the name of his opponent. He should just say he's running against Washington. And of course, we know what happened with young Joe Biden. He wins his Senate race. 4 years later, he's Jimmy Carter's pollster. And it's the Florida primary, a very important primary. And Jimmy Carter is in a showdown against George Wallace. George Wallace is running for president for the third time. And his slogan is basically trolling. He says, send them a message, right? He's saying, to all these Southern, reactionary guys in pickup trucks, let's really stick it to them libs by giving a really strong showing for me. And Jimmy Carter comes back, and Pat Caddell comes up with an even better slogan. This time, don't send them a message, send them a president. We'll even troll them harder. And Jimmy Carter wins that primary. And one result of that is that all these liberals in places like New York decide that Jimmy Carter is the liberal great hope because he can defeat all these right-wing populist reactionaries. He can reach the deplorables. And that's an enormous step in Jimmy Carter's rise to the presidency. And it's completely based on this insight that people vote on these like visceral feelings they have about candidates. And fast forward, another 20 years, and Pat Caddell is a big supporter of Donald J. Trump. He just died, by the way, so I don't have to worry about him libeling me.
Okay, well, there we go. Good. We can crap
I can
all
libel
over.
him. I mean,
Exactly.
I'm not going to libel him.
We can.
He's not going to sue me.
We can crap all over Pat Caddell because he was one of the original sort of like a Fox Democrats, if you will.
Right.
I guess back in the day. But what also struck me too, just was that occasionally you would hear that like, I'm voting either Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump. What?
Right. Same deal.
And it's sort of a similar dynamic. And I'm sort of that insight, as much as like just the idea of Pat Caddell just bums me out. But that insight is it's fascinating in terms of of this whole epoch that you cover, because the interplay between sort of material concerns and non-material concerns, or material concerns based upon sort of like cultural grievance. I mean, all of these things, it's sort of fascinating. And so segueing into basically what you're talking about is there's three elements of the growth of... Let
me actually
go ahead.
quickly interrupt you, because this gets the con job part of it, right? So when Jimmy Carter becomes president, Pat Caddell forms his own private polling firm, and he's advising Jimmy Carter at the same time as he's polling for private clients like the government of Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
Just speechless.
Yeah, well,
Continue.
There you go. I mean, that sounds like Pat Caddell in a way, to a certain extent. But okay, so you're when we talk about the rise of of Reagan, there are three sort of broad elements that you cite: the new right, the sort of the migration of evangelicals into the public sphere, leave unto Caesar no more, I guess.
Right.
And then what you call the class consciousness of business interests awaken. And I think you called them the boardroom Jacobins. So
that's right.
Which one of those of that troika makes sense to start with first?
We can start with the new right and the evangelicals, because they work together and eventually fuse with the boardroom Jacobins. So we can roll up the whole 900 pages in a few quick sentences.
Great.
So basically, Jimmy Carter is the first person that evangelicals retreat from their tradition of not getting involved in partisan politics. There's a line in Thessalonians, keep your eyes on things above and not things of this world, right? So a lot of preachers, even if they're super conservative, they don't really get themselves involved with, telling their flocks who to vote for, except, with the exception of John F. Kennedy, because he's supporting the whore of Babylon and is going to help turn over the country to the Vatican.
Right.
But we'll just leave aside that complexity. And you have these guys who basically are coming out of the Goldwater campaign, are traumatized by Goldwater's huge loss in 1964, and fast forward 10 years later, and they're all these conservative strategists. They call themselves the New Right, and they basically come up with the idea that the reason that Barry Goldwater lost was that he was much too explicit about the actual agenda, the economic and policy agenda of a conservative president, doing things like making Social Security voluntary and thus destroying it, privatizing the TVA and turning over this amazing public resource that gave rural South electricity for the first time, and turning it over to business. All this, ending agricultural subsidies. They realized that they can do a much better job of electing conservative politicians if they respond to people's actual terror about how the social changes of the 1960s are being institutionalized. and how people are enjoying more sexual freedom, women are enjoying more independence. And they do things like they scan the horizon for things that are just pissing people off in rural America. Like, for example, the fact that the school board in Charleston, West Virginia, has adopted multicultural textbooks. And that was in 1974. I write about it in my last book. And it gets these people in the rural hollers so mad that they start a movement that ends up with the dynamiting of the school board. And what the new right does is they have a new think tank called the Heritage Foundation, and they send lawyers to Charleston, to West Virginia, to represent the guys who are dynamiting the school building. And by the way, hooking them up with all these other anti-textbook crusaders all over the country. So they do that with the ERA. They do that with gay rights. And what they call that is organizing discontent.
That's Howard Phillips, right? Is one of those, is I think that was his sort of quote, Phillips.
Yeah, Howard Phillips says, we organize discontent. Another one of these guys is a guy named Paul Weyrich. Both of them, by the way, become theocrats who argue that the Bible should be the basis for civil law by the 1980s and 1990s. And Paul Weyrich says, sex is the Achilles heel of the liberal Democrats. In other words, people like their Social Security, people like their Medicare, but if we can just reach them through their rage at the Democrats' commitment to sexual equality, and abortion, then we can win them for the Republican Party. We can win them for conservatism. Now, that's kind of part one of this coalition. The leader of these guys is a guy named Richard Viguerie. They call him the godfather of the new right. And his specialty is basically the kind of manipulation of Facebook that we see by kind of Russia and the far right in 2016. But he does it with something called direct mail. He sends these terrifying letters to millions of people who, whose names appear on mailing lists because they once gave to a conservative politician, or they subscribed to a conservative magazine, or whatever. He has millions of names, and he sends out these terrifying letters saying the liberals want to force homosexuals to teach your children homosexuality. Send $10 to make this stop, and we'll try and elect this politician, right? He gets rich off this. And it's going pretty well. But one of the things he realizes very early, kind of in the middle of the 1970s, is the best possible way to weaponize this strategy is to win over all these right-wing conservative fundamentalist preachers who have abstained from politics for so many years. And if he does that, he basically can't lose because he'll have these automatic free sync organizations. So basically have the equivalent of the union movement for the right. And so a big part of the book is how he recruits people like Jerry Falwell to form this organization, the Moral Majority, right? And how, kind of stations across along the way are these attempts to defeat the Equal Rights Amendment, which, give him more names for his mailing list, attempts to, support things like the Hyde Amendment, absolutely savage, nasty, awful backlash movements against gay rights, in which you find preachers, basically unfurling this QAnon-like theory that gay men are recruiting children and murdering them, right? It's absolutely ugly stuff. But, long story short, it succeeds. Jerry Falwell becomes one of the most important backers of Ronald Reagan. So then you get in kind of stool three of the Reagan coalition. And that's not just kind of small businessmen, but the kind of Fortune 500 CEOs who during the golden years of capitalism after World War II in the 50s and the 60s, who are making money hand over fist, completely accept the idea of the liberal state as equal partners in the economy of the United States. They accept regulation as a cost of doing business. They make their peace with unions. They call it the labor management accord. Right. They call it the liberal consensus, right? And what happens is after the Arab oil embargo of 1973, when profits start declining because people don't realize that all this prosperity is based on the existence of cheap energy, right, which actually the price actually goes down in real dollars since World War II. And no one even really thinks about this as something that could, go away. Part of the way they deal with that trauma to their business model is that they completely abandon the liberal consensus and become propagandists against regulation, against unions. And I call them the boardroom Jacobins, because suddenly these nice, polite CEOs form these ad hoc coalitions to create these basically disinformation campaigns. And by the way, Sam, when I go on nice, polite radio shows, I don't put things so bluntly, but I think your listeners
can handle it. We can handle it,
right? Stuff like cartoons, stuff like fake editorials that they have, the Chamber of Commerce write or pretend that are kind of submissions from ordinary citizens. And this stuff is so successful that I quote a poll in 1978 that 2/3 of the country thinks that corporations are paying taxes that are too high. Right.
Yeah, that is.
So all this stuff is happening way before Ronald Reagan is even nominated.
So, all right. So I want to start with, I want to go back over these three different stools. And I also want to talk about that meeting that
I love the word stool, by the way, because it has that wonderful double meaning.
Exactly. I want to talk about that meeting with I think it was Falwell and some of those boardroom people. And how
not Falwell, but it was definitely Howard Phillips was there.
Phillips,
Richard Viguerie.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all right, but
it was at Richard Vigorie's house.
So okay, right. So all right. So getting back to the new right, this notion of organizing discontent is fascinating to me, because it all this was when these cultural aggrievements. Right. And this has been, it seems like this has been the story. I mean, I don't know, I guess to a certain extent, it's, it goes back to the pre-Civil War, right? A certain amount of cultural aggrievement that drives this. And in many respects, this is just the latest iteration of that.
Absolutely true.
And they're organizing this discontent, and in some respects they're also driving it, I guess is a way.
That's right.
And but what,
considering the fact that that schools are actually not forcing children to accept homosexuality from their teachers, they are in fact driving it.
Right.
It's made up.
Right. And it's almost, it reminds me of like stuff like this is the war on Christmas. I mean, it seems like that's from a bygone era, but they would just go around and find like, hey, there was a school in Wisconsin that took the word, Jesus out of the song Silent Night. Yeah. And
there was a guy who actually burned a Bible in Boston Commons after the anti-gay rights crusade in Miami in a witch's costume. So that was a big one.
Right. I mean, these type of things, and then they get sort of blown out. So, but the people that they were appealing to, were they religious folks? I mean, and then there was this realization by guys like Phillips and Viguerie that we can go to they're sort of like their shepherds.
Jack right into the matrix. Yeah. We can jack right into the cortex, right? Skip the middleman and go to the preachers.
Right. I mean, were they trying to reach those same people, or were those people sort of adjacent?
Adjacent. Yeah. So, all these people who are like all the anti-gay rights initiatives that I write about in the ballot in 1977 and 1978, those were all started generally by preachers, right? So it's not like preachers were not part of the game, right? But then they realized that if they get the preachers as basically their precinct captains, right, which happens with the Reagan campaign, then they have this solid gold. And by the way, let me remind you of a story that's in chapter 1 of the book, in which Gerald Ford's pollster is having a strategy meeting for Gerald Ford's presidential campaign against Jimmy Carter, and he's going through all these statistics about how many Americans are calling themselves born again. And all of Ford's campaign consultants are kind of cracking all these jokes about how they should nominate Billy Graham instead, or Oral Roberts. And the pollster's like, guys, stop joking. This is really serious stuff. These guys have the most powerful political machine in the history of America, right? So that's basically they're kind of cutting out the middleman. Exactly.
And then the irony, of course,
Jimmy Carter has it in 1976, but by 1980, Jimmy Carter, who's very much a traditional Southern Baptist, in not trying to bring his religious values into his policy making and supports things like the ERA, he's completely considered a familiar of the devil by then.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. So, in some ways, at like in I guess stage one of liftoff, as it were, for the evangelical sort of politicization, that helps Jimmy Carter because they're like, oh, he's one of us.
Exactly.
But then they start to realize, like, oh no, actually, we're slightly different, or they get trained
They realize
to be
that
different.
Jimmy Carter is friends with Bob Dylan, and Jimmy Carter reads Reinhold Niebuhr, is not a fundamentalist, and Jimmy Carter, is really big on the Equal Rights Amendment, and they're basically considering everything in life as completely a battle between good versus evil, and Jimmy Carter's on the wrong side of all these questions.
So I'm trying to like get a sense of how they move from, so they realize that like Goldwater's recipe is just like sort of dry policy that people, if they really sat down and thought about it, wouldn't like. And so
that's right.
And so we've got to make it more about like just channeling their anger and have them vote against things rather than sort of for things on some level.
Right.
And then it's like they expand the playing field. Like at one point, it felt like, 5 or 6 years ago that shrinking the deficit was just one more sort of cultural signifier that was like almost like gods and guns, or being anti-gay. It was like it was just another sort of box. And is that what basically the process that took place? I mean, is that how we got to let's talk about the anti-tax movement that sort of propelled, because in what started in California, the next place after Prop 13 was Proposition 3 in Massachusetts. And I was in high school at that time, and it was just like overnight, we lost half of everything in our high school. I mean, literally, no sports, no art or anything like that.
Yes, that's another tributary. So I like the river. I like the metaphor of all these kind of tributaries feeding into a river, right? So another tributary is what they call the tax revolt, and that story starts pretty much independently of all this stuff. That's a very specific, weird kind of genesis, and it has to do with talk about organizing discontent, one very specific discontent in one very specific place, and that place is California.
Yeah. And
basically California after World War II is a place that everyone is moving to for obvious reasons, right? It's the golden, it's America, only more so. It's the golden dream. And, GIs are moving there after World War II because they, went to training there and were like, oh my God, palm trees, I can get away from my annoying mother-in-law, whatever. And they're buying bungalows, for like $10,000, and the economy is booming. And one of the reasons, of course, the economy is booming and it's doing so well and it's creating the most dynamic economy basically in the world is because of all the liberal middle class building social programs that Governor Pat Brown is putting in place. Free college, opening campuses everywhere, freeways, water programs. So it's liberalism creating this massive middle class and creating this enormous wealth. And home prices, meanwhile, are skyrocketing. Are you there?
Yep.
So home prices are skyrocketing, and it's crazy. I mean, they're kind of doubling, every decade. So like, your $10,000 house that you buy in 1945 is worth like $100,000 in 1975, and there's no home equity loans. So if your house increases in value by 10 times, your property taxes increase 10 times.
Right.
So it's this very unfair system, and you don't get that money unless you sell the house, and you basically have to come up with this massive cash every year to pay your property taxes. So it's this big policy problem, and all these liberals are working out these really wonky think tanky solutions how to solve this, but the Republicans won't pass them through the legislature, because if they do, then the current Democratic governor, who happens to be Jerry Brown, Pat Brown's son, will get the credit, and then he'll get reelected. And they want to elect a Republican governor. So they sabotage all the solutions to the problem, and that creates an opening for this absolutely lunatic, far-right populist poop stirrer. I know that you have FCC issues here, named Howard Jarvis, who, is this far-right gadfly in Los Angeles. He keeps on running for mayor and coming in like 10th place. One year his platform is getting rid of garbage collection because he doesn't believe in government. He's a guy who keeps on showing up at the Los Angeles City Council meeting. They turn off his microphone because he won't stop screaming at them. He manages to get on the ballot for the 1978 primary election, Proposition 13, which is this radical property tax fix that limits property taxes to 1% of value, but not only for homes, but also for businesses. So it's basically a giveaway to corporations. And it also has this part of it where if the legislature in Sacramento wants to raise any other tax, sales tax, income tax, whatever, they need a 2/3 supermajority. Yep. So it basically sabotages fiscal, public finance in California like forever. And by the way, there's a great irony to this. One of the reasons the effects of this aren't felt, and one of the reasons it spread to the rest of the country, because people are like, oh, look, it worked, California's doing just fine, was because there was a massive budget surplus at the time because of all the tax increases that Ronald Reagan signed when he was governor in the 60s. So that's a little irony right there. So basically Proposition 13 passes, and a lot of that is racial, right? A lot of that is all this government is going to support Black people, and it's massively more popular among white people than Black people. And people will say things like, they would do polls like, if the government doesn't have enough money to pay for services because of Proposition 13, what kind of services should be cut? And 60% of people would say, oh, well, welfare, of course. And 1% of people would say, oh, well, if fire services maybe. Right. And of course, property taxes don't pay for welfare, but they do pay for fire services. So really it's this massive con job that destroyed the glorious public education system of California, yet today. But it passes, and it's so successful that politicians all over the country, including liberal Democratic politicians, leap on the bandwagon. Howard Jarvis goes to Washington and visits the Senate, and I have a scene of all these Democratic senators basically groveling at his feet and saying, how can we do this, in our state? And, some people like George McGovern are like, guys, this is crazy. There's a liberal Republican, Ed Brooke from your own home state of Massachusetts. And he says, guys, Proposition 13 is not some magic word, but, the genie is out of the bottle. And of course, a big backer of Proposition 13 is this and all this principle of, limiting taxes generally is of course, Ronald Reagan. And he gets an enormous political boost for this as he's beginning to create his organization for the presidency. So you have, this coalition, anti-tax crusaders, which also include, corporate America, which is, of course, paid all these propagandists to convince people that the reason the American economy is doing bad is because corporate taxes are so high. Complete snow job, of course. You have these terrified Christians who believe that Jimmy Carter is going to shut down their churches unless they, hire gay preachers. And you have these brilliant, cunning, vicious new right organizers who are weaponizing campaign finance law. They create this political action committee, the National Conservative Political Action Committee, even only in the middle of 1979, a year and a half before the election, comes out with these savage attack ads against all these great liberal senators who are running up re-election in 1980, like George McGovern and Birch Bayh and Frank Church, claiming that they're secret ultra liberals. And the guy who's the head of the National Conservative Political Action Committee, the youngest member of the New Right leadership cadre, says the great thing about this political action committee thing is that we can lie through our teeth in these ads and the politician we support stays clean. Right. And to put a cherry on top, this particular guy, whose name I can never remember in interviews because I've repressed it because he's so evil, he is secretly gay. All his comrades and colleagues in the New Right know he's gay, even though he's, helping lead this movement that's weaponizing anti-gay prejudice in order to get power for the plutocrats. And of course, he dies in the middle of the 1980s from AIDS.
Oh, geez.
So this is my happy little tale.
Well,
buy the book.
And by secret ultra liberal, what they're saying is not they are for
Giving you Social Security.
Right. They're not for it's not they're super socialist. It's that they're going to have gays, babysit your kids, and
they're
women.
also going to disarm us against the Soviet Union.
Right. So it's all these sort of like cultural touchstones that they're attacking them on, not on like economic policies necessarily.
Right. Although, and this is kind of the answer to your original question, they are kind of, through these issues like taxes, easing people into this small government ideology,
right,
which a lot of the preachers believed in anyway. Like Jerry Falwell, he
explain
was
this,
like a libertarian.
Explain this, because the reason why it was not, I think like the popular impression is that abortion is what drove this evangelical move into this coalition with Viggory and these business leaders. But in fact, it was much more material for them.
Right. So one of the things that happens is there are all these Christian schools that all these preachers are starting basically to protect our dear little ones from things like, science. The teaching that the world was created in 6 days and the seventh day God rested.
And integration. And integration.
Well, so
right?
that's kind of a complicated story. So at the same time, after Brown versus Board of Education, all these Southern racists are.
Are you there, Rick? We seem to have lost him for a moment.
You dropped.
Oh, I did? Oh, gosh.
Preachers begin.
I'm sorry, Rick. I'm sorry. We just dropped for a second. So just get into that about the integration. Sorry.
Right. So basically, they're different, right? So a lot of these Christian schools are not segregationists, and a lot of these preachers are trying to recruit African Americans. But why would you want to go to, if you're black, why would you want to go to one of these preachers' schools when this was the same guy who was, fighting against Brown versus Education 20 years ago? But basically, the IRS comes up with new regulations to make sure that no private schools are segregating. And every school, including, these Christian academies, have to prove either that they have, basically 5% of the population of African Americans in their community, or that they're at least, making some token efforts at minority recruitment. And if they don't, the IRS might investigate with, the remote possibility that they're going to lose their 501c3 tax exemption. And when that happens in 1978, all these preachers go ballistic. And that's when you get the kind of religious freedom arguments you get now from people like the Hobby Lobby, which is basically that the government has no business regulating my quote unquote church, meaning this school I've opened. So I have this example of there's a Christian school in Concord, New Hampshire in 1977 that's housed in this rickety building that is not up to code and not up to the local building code. And the preacher is so apoplectic that the local government is going to insist that like the school is safe for these children to go in, that he gets fundamentalist preachers from all over the country to come to this rally in the town square. And he says he's willing to go to jail in order to fight, the imposition of Caesar, these kind of tax collecting, centurions from, his ministry. And that sort of energy is really what makes preachers en masse flock into this new right project. This idea that they're going to kind of lose their tax exemptions because they're not going to, they refuse to do things like, fill out forms saying how many African American students they have.
Let's talk a little bit about the Democrats because, they
our friends, the Democrats.
Well, yeah, I mean, on some level, like, right, you write about Muskie and, basically,
and how tough they are in fighting for regulation and how willing they are to basically tell companies like General Motors to go to hell if they don't like it. Right.
Right. Yeah.
That's
Explain that story.
See.
That story about Muskie and the cafe standards.
Right, my favorite. So Edmund Muskie is the tribune of the environmentalists in the Senate. And by the way, he's the guy that Richard Nixon sabotaged out of the race, and that was a big part of the Watergate scandal. But anyway, Edmund Muskie sponsors a bill to require car manufacturers to meet minimum mileage standards. They're called cafe standards. They still exist. and the car manufacturers, I'm kind of truncating a bunch of different things, say, well, we don't have the technology to do that. We need to negotiate this. And Muskie says, I don't care. If you don't have the technology to keep America's air clean, you don't deserve to make your product, right? I mean, imagine if the Democrats said it to Facebook or Amazon, if you can't control your platform, you don't deserve to have a platform. And at one point in the negotiations, one of the car industry lobbyists hands this guy named Leon Billings, who is the main aide for their environmental committee, a single sheet of paper that has their suggestions about how these negotiations can go forward. And Leon Billings folds the piece of paper into a paper airplane and sails it over their head.
I mean,
no negotiations.
But that dynamic of the Democrats saying, look, the people, broadly speaking, are not going to pay for your externalities, right? Like you cannot. Right. And at that time, there was a lot less hostility towards. They were a lot more defensive of, I think, labor at that time. You're not going to exploit labor. Right. You're not going to exploit our natural resources. The way that you calculate your profits have to include not offloading the costs to society. Right. What happened?
Yeah. What happened? Well, one of the things that happened, and I hate to say this to our dear old friend, is Jimmy Carter happened, right? I mean, he was a huge fan of deregulation. And I mean, the simplest way to put it, this is kind of how a Marxist would put it, was profits were falling, right? And again, that's what kind of mobilized the boardroom Jacobins. And everyone was kind of desperate. How was America going to reestablish this kind of economic power and strength that seemed to be ebbing away, week by week, month by month, year by year in this era of high inflation, high unemployment, slow growth, stagnating productivity. And this is kind of where the shock doctrine comes in. This is where you get the kind of Wall Street Journal editorial page and these kind of supply side quack economists who are basically saying, wow, everyone's desperately casting about for a solution. We'll put something on the table that's simple, easy to understand, and politicians will back because it's so simple and easy to understand and so easy to sell. And one of those ideas is that this entire economic ordeal is being caused by deregulation, which was nonsense. I mean, environmental deregulation, just like people who talk about the Green New Deal point out, was creating jobs. It wasn't destroying jobs, right? And then they were saying it was happening because of high corporate taxes. They called it a capital formation crisis, right? And I say as soon as they came up with that idea, you began to see it reverberating across the pages of the congressional record. You got people like Tom Bradley, the liberal Democrat mayor of Los Angeles, who was testifying before Congress, having been recruited by these lobbyists, saying, well, God, Los Angeles' economy and African-American unemployment is going through the roof because of the capital formation crisis, not because, external factors going on halfway around the world that we have no control over.
Speaking of the oil shocks and whatnot.
Right. And one of the problems with Jimmy Carter is that he considers, he believes in this incorrect theory that the reason we have so much inflation is that we have high deficits, which is one of the tragic ideas of all time, because of course now we have massive deficits and no inflation.
Right.
So it's completely incorrect. And Stuart Eisenstadt was his chief policy advisor, and he just came out with a 1,000-page book about the Carter administration. And never once does he acknowledge this. He just says, "Oh, well, we tried to balance the budget because budget deficits were causing inflation." And so Jimmy Carter, whenever he would address the public about the economy, he would say that we need to sacrifice, that the government has to do less, that we need to make do with less. And, when it came to energy, that was great. That was prophetic. But when it came to the economy, it was a tragic mistake. And it was a tragic political mistake, because who are you going to vote for? The guy who says the way to solve the economic crisis is by cutting everyone's taxes by 30%. That's what Ronald Reagan said. Or the guy who says we all need to tighten our belts.
I mean, that was the interesting sort of dynamic, is that usually, or at least theoretically, right, and you write about this, the Democrats are Santa Claus and the Republicans are the Grinch or whatever it is. And Reagan was able to turn that on some level. And we should say that, like, there's a lot of things that are happening here in these preceding years. You've got the oil embargo, and then a second oil crisis. You've got we're off the gold standard at that point, and people don't really fully understand the implications of that, I think, in that decade, and probably for decades afterwards in some level, like in terms of our capacity to print money and have a deficit and not be the same problem. And it also sort of feels like Carter, there was something very moralistic about Carter. Like, some of like the things that the notion of austerity was, maybe I'm projecting, but was like religious.
That was absolutely the grounding of his vision of society. And another part of the tragedy was he didn't really say that when he was running for president in 1976. He said, "I'm never going to lie to you," right? But here's this guy who kind of grows up on this farm in which they tan their own hides, and they render their own soap. And, he is, when he's like 10 years old, he begins walking a mile to 5 miles, I think, to town every morning to sell boiled peanuts. And raises enough money by the time he's in college that he's bought 3 houses as investment properties. So this idea of sacrificing in order to get ahead is absolutely central. And yes, it is religious. It's this kind of hard shell Baptist. We sit on hard wooden pews in kind of unair conditioned hard wooden churches. And if you look at his speeches and what he's most remembered for, this is where his greatest passion resides. Right? He had this quote that he loved to repeat over and over again. It was from Walter Lippmann from like 1940, speaking to his, Harvard graduating class at a reunion. He said, we've all enjoyed too much ease, and we need to sacrifice if we're gonna, defeat this danger to civilization. And he was referring to Hitler, of course. But Jimmy Carter would repeat this all the time, as if the American people wanted to live in a situation where they were acting as if they were at war.
Right. All right. So lastly, let's just touch on this quickly, because on some level, this is the race between Reagan and Carter, I think, really speaks to it. Maybe in some respects, I mean, it's not exactly analogous, but there's a similar element between, maybe the 2016 election in terms of the way that the Democrats viewed Reagan, and the idea of nobody seemed to like either one of these candidates that much. And it was just who was least disliked won.
Yeah, it's I think there's a statistic 80% of people voted for Reagan because they quote unquote wanted to change. Nothing ideological.
Right. Well, talk about lastly the debate, because that that's
a parable about democratic overconfidence.
Yeah.
And basically the entire Carter reelection strategy was based on proving to the electorate that Jimmy Carter was smarter than Ronald Reagan. And of course, when it comes to election, the person who wins the election is the person who's smarter, you might say. They decided that if they could just get Jimmy Carter on the stage with Ronald Reagan in a debate, and they negotiated enough time for Jimmy Carter to point out all of Ronald Reagan's, mistakes and lies, that the scales would fall from the public's eyes and Jimmy Carter would win. And going into the debate, it was just about tied in all the polls. And Jimmy Carter executed on his strategy flawlessly. He pointed out that that Ronald Reagan had questioned Social Security, and Ronald Reagan made a lie in response. And then Jimmy Carter then, a couple minutes later, pointed out that Ronald Reagan had started his political career in 1961 lobbying against Medicare. And of course, you probably have played the album where Ronald Reagan says, as quoted by Eric Trump, by the way, in his convention speech, that if Medicare passes, although Eric Trump didn't mention that this was a reference to Medicare, that Americans will be telling their children stories about what the nation was like when it was free.
Yep.
And Ronald Reagan responded, "There you go again." And when he said that, the audience laughed because it was a real good one-liner. And backstage, the Carter people all gave each other high fives because he had fallen into their trap, and they just presumed that the headlines the next morning would be Ronald Reagan lies about his record. Instead, the headlines were Ronald Reagan convinces the public he's a charming, decent guy. And Ronald Reagan wins in a landslide.
And that there you go again.
So
that there you go again, referred to the idea that, you know, you're mean, you're a school marm, you're distorting
my record.
Right.
Even though he was absolutely not distorting his record, he was telling a bald-faced truth.
And then, well, I guess all of this has been history on some level. And
we shall overcome.
Yes. Well, I mean, and do you think that, lastly, let's just end on this, the media's inability to sort of like, and it's a very different media landscape in many respects, I think, now than even was like 10 years ago. But I feel like 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, the media was much similar to the way it was in 1980 than it is today, right? Like, you know, that social media and the ability for other sort of voices to hit on the same platform, if you will, has changed things a bit. But the media had no ability to deal. They called Reagan Teflon, and part of it was because of that, you know, of instances like that debate on some level.
Yeah, it was the ideology of balance, and I'm very proud of my ability to kind of come up with an account from that campaign of, you know, basically how that all locked into place, and show that the Reagan campaign had a specific strategy that you know was revealed in documents to work the refs and get them to start calling Jimmy Carter mean. That Jimmy Carter used to be a nice guy, but now he was a mean guy. And I show that kind of working and worming its way into the media's mindset week by week as they try and get a handle on anything that they can do to criticize Jimmy Carter so they can balance the idea that they must be tough on Ronald Reagan because they're liberal and the media is liberal, which is, you know, nonsense. They bend over backwards to be nice to Ronald Reagan. The New York Times never criticized Ronald Reagan for his, you know, his lie about Social Security, but they did run 50 articles about this made up scandal called Billygate, which was kind of the butter emails of 1980.
I mean, really, Obama was the first president to run as a Democrat, I think, in at least my lifetime, who was not subjected to that. And Biden seems to get some of that as well, where it's like they're in some ways immune from criticism.
Yeah, and that's the kind of media environment all Democrats have to negotiate. And of course, all Democrats, every Democrat runs as kind of a budget hawk because they still have to somehow disprove this non-fact that Democrats are fiscally irresponsible, and they never get credit from it. I mean, I have a quote from a Democratic pollster in 1978, basically saying, when you read about the Democratic Party, you still get the same New Deal cliches. No one's even reporting the fact that, you know, Jimmy Carter has completely made a hard right turn away from this whole ideology.
And that's been problematic, I think, for those of us who want the Democrats to be more left, is that it took a long time for people to realize that they had moved so far right.
That's exactly right.
Rick,
right as usual, Sam.
Rick Perlstein, let me just thank you for all four of these books.
How funny the book is, because it sounds so dark and scary.
Well, you know, no, it's not. I mean, like one thing that struck me was like about Superman. Because I just rewatched that with my son, and I was like, this seems like the most 80s movie ever. But it was actually in the late 70s, which I guess sort of on some level proves the point on some level. We were that's where we were headed, Superman.
Right. I'll end by quoting Steve Bannon. Politics is downstream from culture.
Isn't that Breitbart? Didn't Breitbart start that?
Did Breitbart say that?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
I think he said
people were willing to vote at the box office for Ronald Reagan before they were willing to vote for Reagan at the ballot box.
Yeah. Well, Rick, thank you so much for these works. I mean, thanks for coming on, but also thank you for writing these books. I mentioned to you before you came on that I'm going to try and get my daughter to read these, she's going to be remote schooling. And I just, to get her on, I feel like just reading these 4 books would be a massive achievement for a kid her age and an understanding of just sort of like, this moment, because
and the amazing thing is Sam's daughter is only 6 years old.
And she's very, well, it's going to take her a while. I think she'll probably be done with this by her teens. But Rick Perlstein, the book is Reaganland, America's Right Turn, 1976 to 1980. We will put a link at majority.fm. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sam.
All right, folks, I'm going to take a quick break, head into the fun half. Do we have Nomi? Nomi will be joining us in the fun half. Just a reminder that it is your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member today at jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, check out the AM Quickie. That is completely free every morning, 6 or 7 minutes with the top headlines of the day, amquickie.com, or you can find it on Spotify or Stitcher or iTunes or whatever you do. And also don't forget, we have merch. You can go to shop.majorityreportradio.com, get some of our merch. And what else I got? That's about it. Nomi.
Hey.
How are you? How was covering the RNC last week?
It was frightening and also hilarious. That's kind of how I dealt with it.
Well, I want to talk about this a little bit in the fun app, because my sense was that it was effective. That
totally.
Yeah. All right.
We'll talk about it in the fun half. Yeah.
Okay. So what's going on with your show this week?
We have really exciting news. It's not this week. It's actually starting next week after Labor Day. We are moving to a sort of daily show. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, we are going to be taping. Oh.
There you go.
So we're going to be moving pretty much daily, Tuesday through Friday. Right after the show, The Majority Report, from 3 p.m. Eastern to 4 p.m. Eastern. Same format. We're going to do an interview, a panel afterwards, keeping it simple, but it was fun, and it wasn't as difficult as we thought it was going to be. So in some ways, I think doing a weekly show, at least for me, was a little bit more difficult. But then again, I don't, all I do is talk, so it's probably more difficult for everybody else.
Well, there you go. So for now, this week, show is going to be on Thursday.
We're going to release something this week, like a normal show, and then next week after Labor Day, we go in full force.
Okay, that's great. All right, and so we'll remind people every day that they can tune into your show. What time is it going to be?
3 p.m. Eastern.
Okay, great.
Right after this show.
Fantastic.
I don't know if we're going to be able to do like the handoff thing, but
hopefully we're supposed to finish by 2:30.
Right.
But we rarely do. Well, we do sometimes. But that's originally this show was supposed to be 45 minutes in the free half, and then 45 minutes in the fun half. It's going to be an hour and a half every day, and it's like over time it just keeps growing and growing. All right. Also, don't forget, tune into the Antifada. You can find that at patreon.com/the Antifada. Matt, what's happening on TMBS?
TMBS tonight, Malika Jabali returns. She was in Kenosha the night of the shooting. She's going to talk to us about that. We're going to talk about Wisconsin a little bit. Then we have an organizer from No Olympics in Los Angeles. Leisha's going to talk to them about, I'm not sure exactly what. And we're going to be talking about oil and oil's new play in plastics, the kind of. David Grissom's going to talk to us about that. So tonight on the TMBS YouTube page and patreon.com/TMBS.
All right. Thank you, Matt. And we will now take a quick break. Head into the fun half. 646-257-3920 is the number. We got a lot of stuff to cover today, and we intend to do it. See you there. Left is best. Jamie and
I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude, you want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
That's some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Ooh.
Rand Paul. I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
I think I might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey! Shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
We are back. It is the fun half. Before we get into the RNC from last week, Nomi, this is really important for people to hear because I had no idea this was going on. I'm a little bit disturbed. I think people should be disturbed by this. It's a little bit scary. Here is Donald Trump talking to Laura Ingraham about a conspiracy about what's going on in the streets that people don't seem to be aware of, and they need to be aware of this. This is clip number 4.
And Biden is, I don't even like to mention Biden because he's not controlling anything.
Who do you think is pulling Biden's strings? Is it former Obama
people
officials?
that you've never heard of, people that are in the dark shadows, people that...
What does that mean? That sounds like conspiracy theory, dark shadows.
No,
What is
and people that you haven't heard of. They're people that are on the streets. They're people that are controlling the streets. We had somebody get on a plane from a certain city this weekend, and in the plane, it was almost completely loaded with thugs wearing these dark uniforms, black uniforms with gear and this and that. They're on a plane.
Where's this?
I'll tell you sometime, but it's under investigation right now. But they came from a certain city, and this person was coming to the Republican National Convention, and there were like 7 people on the plane like this person, and then a lot of people were on the plane to do big damage. They were coming
planning for Washington.
Yeah, this is all happening.
But the money is coming from somewhere.
Money is coming
how can it be
from
tracked?
some very stupid rich people that have no idea that if their thing ever succeeded, which it won't, they will be thrown to the wolves like you've never seen before.
You know what he seems like he's describing to me? The 7 thugs dressed in black gear and with all sorts of gear. like the DHS police.
Right, like he just did
his
it.
own federales.
These thugs, they're going on the street, they're throwing these smoke bombs. They have these, and you know what? They're not getting along with the police. So
they're good guys.
For all we know, he could be hearing from the police saying that they're the thugs, and they're just not communicating with each other.
These are the good guys. These are the good guys. I mean, these are the good guys. Where are they getting their funding? From the Department of Justice. Yeah. That's where they're getting their funding. I can't tell you.
Just a bunch of rich people.
What is it like? Wait, what? Like, I'm not. It's totally top secret. But let me just tell you, there were 7 of them, and they're going on an airplane, all dressed in like black uniforms.
They were wearing their masks, basically,
with all their gear, and they got all their gear on there.
The face shield. I mean, like, what are they so afraid of?
Big
They're just packing the planes, Big
batons, and they're coming from, I'm not going to say what city, but Washington. And my God, he's really, and I like how she's trying to like say like, don't sound too insane.
Right.
Mr. President.
Let's follow the money here.
So, all right. Well, this is on some level and I guess, Biden's just a puppet. Biden's a puppet seems to be one of the themes that they are pushing that came out of there's 2 things. There's 2 like sort of competing themes. One is Biden's a puppet. And the other, and maybe this isn't so competing, is that Biden is so weak and such a puppet that he's going to allow all this mayhem to exist in the streets. But during the RNC, it also felt like what they were trying to do was to give license to Republican women in the suburbs to vote for Donald Trump.
Exactly.
Right? Like, and here's proof. They say I'm a racist, but look, I just pardoned a black guy.
Right.
And they say I hate immigrants. I just did a naturalization ceremony.
To show that there were all these people on stage that were essentially trying to show the human side of Donald Trump. The problem is, at the end, Donald Trump had to speak, and he just can't resist. He just can't resist being inhumane and lacking empathy. And so it's not that necessarily they need to win all of the women of like the margins right now. I think, or at least last week, it was Biden was up by 15% with women, where he needed to be. It's that they need to win a chunk of it. They need to bring back a few of the Republican women who might be, disgusted by how Trump has treated basically everybody. So, they insulated him with these narratives.
Yes, and I think even like when Ivanka came out and said, well, he's how my dad is. He flies off, but he does good things. I mean, that was basically the way that they were trying to sort of like build in the critique before he comes out and speaks. Mm-hmm. They basically just say like, don't listen to what he says, listen to what he means. That it's that type of thing. But here is Donald Trump talking to Laura Ingraham, and he is incapable of getting strategy without sort of like just revealing it all. Where's the thing where he starts talking to Ingraham about the women? They say the women. Oh yeah, here it is. Okay, yeah, this is clip number 8, is it? I think, right?
But are the suburbs in danger? Because they say that's fear mongering on the part of
I know the
Republicans.
suburbs. Look, Westchester was ground zero, okay, for what they were trying to do. What? They were trying to destroy the suburban, beautiful place, the American dream, really. They want low-income housing, and with that comes a lot of other problems, including crime. May not be nice to say, but I'll say
You're not saying all poor people are criminals, though.
No, I'm not saying that at all, but it does. There is a level of violence that you don't see. So you have this beautiful community in the suburbs, including women, right? Women, they want security. I ended where they build low-income housing project right in the middle of your neighborhood. I ended it. If Biden gets in, he already said it's going to go at a much higher rate than ever before. And you know who's going to be in charge of it? Cory Booker. That's going to be nice, okay?
What?
So I think that women are going to want, well, for a lot of other reasons, the stock markets will crash. As sure as you're sitting there, your 401ks will go down to a small.
There it is. And now it's also interesting, like, why should people be so afraid of Cory Booker?
Right.
I wonder what he's saying about low-income housing and moving into the suburbs, and your neighborhood's going to get ruined. I mean, he's just basically stoking those racial fears, but also so explicitly saying, like, the women are like, they told me I'm doing poorly with women, so I'm going to say women.
And I'm going to go on Laura Ingram's show. Oh, I know a woman I like. She's also a Nazi. I don't know if ultimately that's actually like the smartest tactic for them, is to put Ivanka on like more mainstream shows like The View or whatever to win over those women, because he's not going to do it because he doesn't know how to exercise any sort of empathy. I think what's really shocking, and I don't know how people digest their income status right now, but when he says low income housing, he clearly means people of color. But with income inequality so stark and with the economy collapsing, there are plenty of people that are Trump voters who may be in low-income housing. I wonder if they identify that, if they can connect the dots there. You know what I mean? Like, he's demonizing, like, especially, in the suburbs. There are plenty of people that may not fall into his target audience of attacking people of color that also live in low-income housing, because he's still thinking in the 80s. He still doesn't understand we're not living in the same New York as before. So he might be hurting people he needs to turn out and vote, which is like white racist.
I don't think that is going to put off anybody of his coalition. I just don't think that I don't think that he's going to lose those people. I think what drives them is a racial resentment in many respects, and a cultural resentment. And, I think there's, and yesterday I was talking about my concerns and, fears that Biden has nothing to sort of like pivot to in this situation when Trump is out there just sort of like, running up the board with this racial resentment. I don't know if it'll be enough for Donald Trump.
No.
And maybe Biden doesn't need to do any of that.
But in 2016, it was about people who are hurting. Like, it was very much, his message was about working people, the economy. I mean, I know that's the problem he's facing right now, is he's trying to pretend that the economy's fine or was fine before COVID. And so, but he's using terms that I just don't think would have flown, like Bannon, whoever was crafting this in 2016, I don't think they'd let him demonize poor people, because in his mind, poor people are people of color.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
I know what you're saying. Although I just don't see any evidence that he's losing those people.
Right.
To the extent that he's losing anybody, it's college educated, suburban people, to the extent that he's losing anybody.
Right.
And I don't know that he's going to lose that much, frankly, from 2016. He's picked up Black support and Latino support. I mean, it's not huge, but it doesn't need to be huge.
Doesn't have to be.
And he's picked that up in some fashion. I'm not exactly sure how that happens, but
it's diamond and silk.
What? Maybe. I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know what it is. I keep getting dropped from the phone system, so that's what that number keeps happening. I keep getting dropped, and I keep putting it on there. But let's try and take a call and see if we can if I can stay on the phone. Calling from a 303 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Sammy. This is Brittany calling from Denver.
Brittany from Denver. What's on your mind?
Well, I just really wanted to let ASAP Sammy know that he's been giving me a wet-ass P-word since 2014.
Oh, that's very sweet of you.
Shout out to him.
God.
That's very sweet of you. Thank you.
Anytime. But I guess this morning was just a little more frustrating than has been for a while. I've done a lot of screaming into a pillow lately.
Okay.
But I feel like the left maybe needs to start getting a better plan together for what's going to happen the next, 6 months to a year, with how much violence we're going to start to see, I think. It doesn't feel like the left has really got a plan for what happens when they lose this election again.
Well,
but
I think, actually, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I'm starting to sort of read into some of this. There's some organizations that have some plans, but I don't know that they're up to the challenge. I mean, we're looking at a situation now, right, where on election day, Donald Trump could theoretically win the election on election day as mail-in ballots get counted. So on election day, it could appear that he is in the lead. I mean, remember what happened with California, right? And even Paul Ryan was doing this. Reasonable Paul Ryan was saying, like, it's very suspicious that votes keep coming in from California. And it's not suspicious.
Right.
It takes time when you have these mail-in ballots. They don't do the process properly. They're just not suited to doing the process in a quick time. They could do the rolling thing, but there's not enough money to do that, I guess. So on election day, it's conceivable that you have the numbers, like, and I'm just talking about like in Wisconsin or Michigan or Ohio or Pennsylvania or whatever, say, Trump is up by 0.01%, but you haven't counted the mail-in ballots. But what if you get like a Brooks Brothers riot style type of thing, but they're not in Brooks Brothers clothes, right? They're in Patriot Prayer regalia, or they're in Proud Boy regalia, or whatever. And they try and stop the counting. They try and go in and intimidate people. I mean, things could start getting ugly.
I mean, the one aspect that we have to keep in mind is we have a sense of the number of Democrats versus Republicans requesting ballots. So there is going to be some sort of, at least from a media narrative, there is going to be some sort of indication of like, okay, well, we know that in Los Angeles County, it's a 5-to-1 ratio of Democrats who've requested ballots, and it's probably much, much, much higher. But I'm just like, so they'll probably just call it based on that, because that's where the trends are. Or
that California, that's an easy task.
Easy in California, yeah.
But if you're in like Wisconsin, or you're in Michigan, or in Pennsylvania, and you're like, well, they requested these ballots, but we don't know if they're coming in.
Sure.
Or I mean, like, there's that's where the problem comes, and the violence that could follow afterwards. I mean, I think if they lose, is less concerning to me, insofar as at least there'll be a federal apparatus in which to deal with that violence. What I'm concerned about is the violence that happens like in the process of the election, which I do not think is going to be resolved on November 3rd.
Or maybe ever, it looks like.
Well, I mean,
I just don't think Donald Trump has any intention of handing over this power that he's gained in any peaceful kind of way. I think he's the kind of man that would rather burn everything down than to concede, and I'm worried that his supporters are the exact same mindset, and they're the ones that stockpile automatic weapons. So it's very concerning, and I just don't feel like there's anyone. I just don't know that the left is, really preparing itself for what we're about to see and experience.
Right. I mean, do you think that Congress will let that happen?
Appreciate the call. Thank you. Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I have no faith in, the ineptitude of Nancy Pelosi in terms of oversight, or just the unwillingness, is, I think, stunning.
Well,
I put a
say
clip of
this
her yesterday saying Richie Neal is going to go after his taxes.
Unreal.
Richie Neal specifically could have done that 2 years ago.
2 years ago, right.
And he didn't.
How convenient.
Well, a year and a half.
Well, but when I say this is, it's obviously not just Donald Trump's election on the line. If they try to prevent any sort of vote counting, it affects the makeup of Senate, it affects the makeup of Congress. So there's at least some sort of leverage that, Mitch McConnell has or Nancy Pelosi has in some way, because they have their own personal interests in keeping the Senate or winning back the Senate. So I don't know.
What if Mitch McConnell loses the Senate? Do you think he's going to have a problem with, like, I don't have the ability to get Trump out of office? That's got to be up to somebody else. I mean, I would imagine that's what McConnell will do. He'll just hide out in Kentucky. That would be my guess. Here is Tucker Carlson claiming that he's having. I mean, can you imagine like having a guest on about the Rittenhouse shooting, murder, and not really sort of boning up on it at all? That would be weird to me. Well, that's what Tucker Carlson's doing here.
Johnson,
Kyle,
the only individual.
I should tell you, this is Rittenhouse's lawyer.
Right.
This is the attorney for Kyle Rittenhouse explaining his defense.
That's unbelievable.
That Kyle shot were the 3 individuals that were attacking him and putting him at risk of serious bodily harm or death. This is a 17-year-old kid. This is amazing.
So let me ask you this, and I think that's a fair point. He didn't shoot indiscriminately, and I'm taking your word for it in the first one because I haven't seen the video, but in the second 2, I have seen the video. One guy attacked him, the other guy was pointing a gun at him. Here's my question. He shot that man in the arm, and the man backed off. That man survived. That man has not been charged. He came at a 17-year-old with a gun. Why has he not been charged?
So here's a question that I have, Tucker. Where are the charges for aggravated assault against Kyle Rittenhouse? Where are the charges for arson in our cities? Where are the charges for rioting? Where are the charges for crossing state lines? And where are the charges against the people who are funding this activity and who are financing it? And why is Kyle Rittenhouse a 17-year-old lifeguard who is attempting to protect the businesses in his community and attempting to help wounded protesters and was protecting his own life while Kenosha was burning? Why is he the one sitting in jail tonight as forces within this country sickeningly attempt to find a way to bring harm to him while he's in detention?
It is sickening.
Oh, it's so
Thanks
sickening.
for coming on tonight and giving your side of this, which has not been heard. I haven't heard it anyway, so I appreciate it.
Gee, I wonder why.
Yeah.
It's not going to be in court. It's not admissible to court because it's a lie. Because there's video footage. Because he murdered 2 people. Are you effing kidding me?
He didn't see the first video. I didn't see the first video of the first killing. That one I didn't want to see. And then of course, Rittenhouse was, of course. Now my understanding is that Rittenhouse is from Illinois.
Crossing state lines.
His community was being protected. I don't wonder what he means by his community.
Right.
He's in the diaspora of Kenosha in Illinois, but I don't know if he felt like his community is like just fellow gun-toting white people. But the idea, like, he's a 17-year-old kid. I mean, you imagine, contrast this. He's a 17-year-old kid. I mean, yes, granted, he had a weapon, and he was geared up, and he was there brandishing this weapon with no sign on his shoulder. Like, I'm only 17. It's unbelievable to me that they think they can get away with this, but they are getting away with it within their own people. It's just a question of how narrow is that?
And again, it's the lawyer said, and I don't understand. I think the lawyer strategy is simply a messaging strategy, not an actual legal strategy. Because he's sitting there saying, "Oh, what about the people crossing state lines with guns? What about an underage kid crossing state lines alone? Where were his parents? Why weren't they? Why was he allowed to go over state line with a gun?" Same exact argument. You can't. It's not going to hold up. Hopefully, in a court of law. I don't know. I mean, this is really horrifying, Sam.
I would love to compare and contrast their response to Trayvon Martin when they talk about it as a kid. He's just a kid.
A kid.
He's just a 17-year-old kid with a semi-automatic weapon.
Yeah. It's Sam. Don't you know it's more dangerous if there's a kid in a hoodie walking down the street, just
with Skittles. Yeah.
Skittles. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Since we're talking about Tucker Carlson's interviewing the DHS acting head, Chad Wolf, who, we should remind you, the Government Accountability Office said has really no legal right to be in this position. He has no legit authority. I don't know, is Congress doing anything about this? Is the House doing anything about it? I
think Rich Neal's on it.
Right. But here he is talking about
again, we heard Donald Trump talking about the conspiracy. They were on a plane, 7 guys with black outfits and gear. Well, here is Chad Wolf saying that we're exploring the possibility of a DOJ RICO case against these protesters.
Residents of those cities can feel safe as they go about their business every day.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. In the meantime, do you think Department of Homeland Security is getting the help it needs from the Justice Department? Why haven't we seen the leaders of Antifa and BLM arrested and charged for conspiracy under, say, RICO, like the heads of the mafia families were?
Well, this is something I've talked to the AG personally about, and I know that they are working on it. Look, we've seen about 300 arrests across this country regarding civil unrest and protesting, violent protesting, I would say, criminal protesting, criminal rioting occur. About 300 arrests. About a third of those or 100 of those arrests have been in Portland specifically, and I know the Department of Justice has charged about 74 or 75 individuals there in Portland with different federal crimes, and we'll continue to see how those investigations are going. The Department of Justice is also targeting and investigating the head of these organizations, the individuals that are paying for these individuals to move across the country. What we know, Tucker, is that we have seen groups and individuals move from Portland to other parts of the country.
Right.
We had about 175 arrests in Kenosha. Almost 100 of them were from out of state. So we know they're moving around. We've seen them in D.C., in Sacramento, and elsewhere. They're organized. We've seen similar tactics being used from Portland and other cities across the country as well. So we know that there's organization. I know the Department of Justice is also looking at that as well.
You're not allowed to fund crime, of course. I mean, if I do business with Iran, I go to jail. But we have domestic terrorism on a greater scale than we've had in my lifetime, 50 years. And the funders of this have not been exposed by the federal government, and they haven't been punished.
Just hold on for 1 second. Like, this is just a blatant lie. We can talk about the domestic terrorism that killed hundreds in Oklahoma. We can talk about the bombings of Planned Parenthood. We can talk about right-wing killings. All the data is there with the Department of Justice. And then, of course, he was also alive during the 70s and into the 80s, when there was actually a lot of domestic terrorism, actual organizations that were like bombing places. Not a question of protesting or lighting a trash can on fire or even smashing windows. I'm not condoning that, but to say that that's like a terrorist organization is just absurd. And if he doesn't think that money that he has contributed to the right to lifers doesn't go to support some of these people who are more militant, I think he's got another thing coming. But and not to mention, he also hired
someone who's actually actively involved. Let's follow the money, Tucker.
Who was playing on these white supremacist forums. God knows how inspiring that was. But
and Proud Boys, riots.
Exactly.
On a greater scale than we've had in my lifetime, 50 years. Wrong. And the funders of this have not been exposed by the federal government, and they haven't been punished, and I'm confused as to why.
Again, I would say that, the Department of Justice, who has the lead in all of those investigations, are certainly moving as quickly.
Do you mind? Why are these fake funders not being exposed?
Well, the other thing is like...
How are they getting from one state to another? What is that? How does that happen? Is it by
Sam,
a car?
The other thing is like RICO doesn't work that way. It's not, he's saying to target crime. That's not actually how they used RICO. They used RICO in a completely different, it was organized from, using lack of using front groups and not paying taxes. And then it opened up to the criminal activity.
He's trying to make it seem like there's this organized, this is all part of what they're trying to do. They're trying to say that this is some type of like the militant arm of the Democratic Party. And you have the puppet Joe Biden, who is both, controlled by these people and controlling these people simultaneously. This is the narrative that they're trying to push. And every element from the president to, the DOJ, to the right-wing media, they all have their role in presenting this narrative. Here is Brian Kilmeade
on Fox and Friends, basically saying the same thing, that the left is really secretly driving Joe Biden. Yeah, I hope.
If Joe Biden had gotten out of the gates in the 90s, you could actually make a case moderate Joe Biden, because technically he was. If he had not fallen on his face in 2007 when he wanted to run for president again, you could say moderate Joe Biden. I looked at his record. But the Joe Biden that we saw emerge as the former vice president to go and get the nomination because no one wanted Bernie Sanders is a different Joe Biden, because we listened to him. And we also, Pete, look who's around him. The people who have signed off to back him are not going to put up with a moderate candidate. Not only is he trying to sell us on being moderate, he's on the record of not being moderate. And what makes people feel, the undecideds and the independents, that he is not going to go way to the left? Why is the squad so silent? Why did Bernie Sanders sign a document basically saying Joe Biden's going to be the most progressive president in his lifetime?
Brian, he's completely captured. He's completely captured by the anti.
But he won't admit it.
No, of course, he can't admit it. In fact, he's going to rely on doublespeak because he needs the people in the middle of places like Pennsylvania who rely on the energy industry to actually vote for him if he wants to win.
But Pete, can you just say this? Know what's really diabolical? He knows the American people want to moderate.
Woman in the middle.
But he also
Jedediah,
knows
she looks like she wants to kill them.
It's almost as if he's running on something to win, but he's telling everyone, I'm not going to be the person I am to get elected.
Almost like a politician, which is what voters rejected in 2016.
Yeah, he stands for nothing. That's why he has Bernie Sanders front and center out talking about his economic agenda. That's why people know that if they vote Joe Biden, they're actually voting for Kamala Harris, because she's going to be the person that's going to really have the influence there. And he seems to not care at all, by the way. So you're going to hear a lot of hypocrisy. You're going to hear, remember, this is the guy who authored the crime bill that's now talking about criminal justice reform. He's been in the Senate for how many decades now, and he's acting like he's the person that's going to come in and effectuate this major change on criminal justice, when his record actually speaks to the complete opposite. So people are going to have to decide.
Well, they are so jumbled. This is the only argument I can come up with that Biden is running the right campaign, is that they can't get their message straight. Yeah. First off, it's like two 17-year-olds who, have got into their parents' liquor cabinet, just going back and forth. And that poor woman in the middle there, she's like, this is not, what are you talking about? He's left, he's not left. And then she comes out with, he stands for nothing. And so the idea that he's a cipher, I think that's actually accurate.
Yeah.
But this whole hypocrisy thing, like his whole record has been strong on crime, and now he's not. Well, you're not necessarily, the message is not cohesive from them.
But I still think it is effective for the voters. They're all fighting over these Republicans who don't know who they are, who watch Fox News. And Joe Biden's not on Fox News. They're not watching MSNBC. They're trying to push the MSNBC, the centrist Republican voters. But the reality is they're all watching Fox News. So when Jedediah Bila, who used to be on The View, says that, that he stands for nothing, I still think it's effective.
Well, yes, but I don't think any of the people that are gettable are watching Fox News.
Oh, I think they are. I think they are. I know plenty of Democrats who watch Fox News. It's insane.
That may be the case, but I think that in terms of them going out with guys like Kasich and whatnot, I don't think they're looking at Fox News viewers, right? Kasich is, he was on Fox News, but he is, persona non grata there. When you talk about Fox News, how big is the audience of Fox News?
Pretty big.
Well, how big though?
I don't know off the top of my head. I know it's way more than MSNBC. It completely annihilates.
Tucker Carlson is by far the biggest star on that show, and his show gets 4 million viewers a night. I think on a really big night. So maybe there's a universe of of 30 million that watch the network.
I don't know. I grew up in Buffalo, as you know. Every time I go back to Buffalo, the Democrats in Buffalo, the Rust Belt types of voters, you go to the gym, you go to the restaurant, you go to anything, and Fox News is on in the background. Not MSNBC, not CNN. And it's not even because they're Trump viewers or Tucker Carlson viewers. It's because they lean more conservative and they'll watch the daytime stuff, which is what this was. And that's what concerns me, is that there is some sort of it's different messages for different audiences, and Biden can't get in on that audience because he doesn't have access to it.
Right. I mean, that's true. Although you can go and look on foxnews.com after the RNC, Kasich supports Biden. But I think the bottom line is that ultimately persuading these people, when Trump has the ability to come out and present a different image, if they're gettable at one point, there's no reason to think that he doesn't have the ability to get them back.
Right.
If they're gettable for Biden, if they're that shaky, they're either there or they're not.
Right.
And fishing for those people seems to me to be a bit of a waste, and perhaps comes at the expense of the enthusiasm of your own base. Now, maybe that's not important. It doesn't matter if I vote unenthusiastically for Joe Biden, it's still a vote for Joe Biden.
But it's contagious, and I think what you're saying is right, because what Jedediah did specifically as the woman on that panel is she created just a little bit of doubt, so that whoever might be inclined just remembers, oh, right, this is that Joe Biden. How do I know now that he's going to be more friendly to us, and that he's not just going to be, oh, it's really about Kamala Harris. Well, I don't know if I like her as a centrist Republican. I don't know if I feel comfortable with her yet. And at the end of the day, like you said, if Biden's not exciting that base, historically we know where that leads. If I'm not sitting here calling up my friends and family to vote for Biden, that's a problem. I'm pretty freaking loud.
Right. Tell them to vote for somebody a down ticket. And
that's what I've been doing.
and then they'll pull the lever for Biden when they get
Or
there.
as Linda Sarsour said, I would rather have Biden as an opponent in the White House than Trump as an opponent in the White House.
Of course. Yeah. I think that was always my feeling too, even with Clinton, is that that's a much better foil for the left. I mean, this conversation just starts at a different place. They're the opening bargaining position. And I think, Fox people were correct in that respect, that the left is going to try and influence Joe Biden. I hope they're right. Mm-hmm. But who knows? All right, let's go to the phones here, if I can stabilize my phone system. Hopefully I have. Calling from a 308 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam.
Is this Kowalski?
My bad. My phone was acting up again. Yeah, it's Kowalski.
All right.
Hey, I was calling in because I was just going to let you know, over the break, I was studying up on my libertarian stuff.
Ooh.
Because I noticed your show was much better when you were just berating libertarians for 40 minutes straight. Like, you didn't have gray hair, more energetic,
yep.
And I wanted to give you that satisfaction again. But unfortunately, after going into it for only like 5 or 6 hours, I realized that the only proper response to libertarianism is to make fun of it. So I can't even ironically try to be a libertarian.
Well, that's disappointing to me, because I could have used that injection of youth and vigor that I used to have.
Have we started?
I think it's because you actually siphon the energy of those people as they realize their life is a lie.
Well, I don't like to talk about it very much, but I do drink the blood of libertarians. I'm not drink. I mean, well, I drink it, but not from them directly. Of course, I pay for them to donate the blood that I drink from the libertarians, like Peter Thiel. He also gets the injections. He gets them from young kids to stay alive. I think that's the story. I don't know if that's true or not. But that was the rumor that was reported, I believe, at one point. Yes, I would get blood infusions from libertarians, and it would make me more youthful. That's right. But of course, during COVID, you don't want to risk that.
Indeed.
So,
well,
you have a little Chiron that says satire, so I can't get accused of drinking the blood of libertarians.
No, I think it'll be the best thing for your career.
Yeah, that would be useful from a PR standpoint.
Oh, well, then I do it.
I heard it. I think I actually saw you one time, like right when you came out of the cryo chamber. You just infused the blood. Yeah.
Yeah, and Medicare pays for it too.
That's true.
In a socialist world, we make sure of that.
That's right. Appreciate the call, Kowalski.
All right, you guys have a good one.
Bye-bye. Let me just remind people, and we're not going to get any libertarians until the Republican, until Trump loses. Well, here's my prediction. Well, it's going to take a little time, but sometime, if Joe Biden wins, sometime in the first year or two of his presidency, libertarians will reemerge as the Republicans try and remarket themselves. This is the way it always happens. They reemerge, and this is their way, their entree back in. And then, of course, they go away when a Republican takes office, because they don't, all the funding dries up and nobody believes them, and they end up having to support and fall in line with the actual Republican, like Rand Paul. When was the last time Rand Paul talked about like the drones in Somalia, let's say?
Right. But they exist still, and they're still funded. I mean, the Heritage Foundation is still operating.
They're like dormant.
It's like,
dormant.
You've got the Hill Rising. Like half of that is libertarian.
It's true, but they're just not as active. They're like bees at night or in early morning. They're there. They're just not buzzing around like they.
It's
do.
mainly talking points filtered in through the media instead of the actual personalities out there. So like they want to combat healthcare and stuff like that.
But isn't that more effective though? Isn't that like they've actually made it? Like they're actually getting their talking points into the mainstream now?
Well, but they've always had their talking points in the mainstream. Paul Ryan, Ayn Rand was his his North Star. They've always been around. It's just that they don't come to the forefront. Let me just say this: if you're a libertarian and you're watching the show, you want to call in, and you want to debate me or talk to me and explain to me about libertarianism, I more than encourage it. And in fact, if you send us an email and put in the subject line, libertarian, and give us your area code, we will look out for you. And I mean, not in your daily life. I'm not saying I'm going to protect you. I'm saying that we will watch for your call, and we can take you. Eventually, we'll get a libertarian line or something like that. That would be great.
And if you're on the fence, voting for Biden for whatever reason still, your own morality or whatever, if defeating Trump is the fastest way to get libertarians back on the line, think about that as a motivator.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. If that provides any incentive. Let's go to 510 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, this is Kenny calling from Berkeley, California. How you doing?
Kenny from Berkeley, California. I'm doing well. What's on your mind?
So if you'll indulge me, I'd like to talk about Michael because he had a really big impact on me. Basically, I started out as one of those obnoxious Sam Harris loving little, 17-year-old. I have a quote, quantitative normie twerps. That's what Michael said in 2018. And that's exactly what I was. And thanks to you guys in the DMR and TMBS, shout out Matt Leck. Thanks for keeping that going. Really appreciate what you guys are doing. And you let me see the light.
Well, tell me what the mechanics of that were. How did you stumble across our shows?
Okay, so my parents are pretty conservative. My dad's a Trumpist. My mom is a never Trumper. It's a weird family dynamic. And I had kind of been, sorry?
No, it sounds like a maybe a little tumultuous at home. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm just turned 24.
Okay, great. All right.
So I kind of was, that conservative bro that thought everyone in his high school was an idiot except for me kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, very libertarian, very much we don't need government. Government is just one of those inefficiencies in our society. And then I guess it was really through the high school education system and public education and actually having good educators that, gave a crap. That started to pull me out of that, and then really it was the 2016 campaign with Bernie where I started listening, and I thought, this makes a lot of sense. So I started digging more into leftism. I kind of, I've listened to the Young Turks, Kyle Kalinske kind of floated around, but you guys really.
Well, how did you come to start listening to any of these shows? Was it just by chance, or were you actively seeking, like, I want to watch a lefty YouTube or?
I guess more the latter. Yeah, it was like I want to know what this is all about, because I had only ever heard that perspective from my parents, and I wanted that, that crazy liberal perspective.
Interesting. So you were a seeker, anyways. It wasn't like you stumbled across this. It was like you were looking for it.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things. The YouTube algorithm kind of blurs the lines between a stumbler and a seeker, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why I ask, because I'm very curious about that, because people sometimes, give me grief. I get emails now and then. I mean, it's fine. I appreciate actually people questioning, what we do on the show at different times. Like, why are you spending so much time on Shapiro or this guy or that guy, and part of it is what your story is, and part of it is one of the things that we have to do is get into the algorithm in such a way that if somebody is watching a lot of Ben Shapiro, we pop up, and that's the only way that we can. I mean, this is the advantage of the form of media that we're using here, because we were just talking about, like, you go up to Buffalo and you come into, you go into the pizza place and they just got Fox News just playing on a loop, and then you walk out of the pizza place, you get into your car, and it's all right-wing talk radio, and nothing can pierce that. But the difference for younger people, but also, there's also a cohort of people up into their 60s and 70s who watch YouTube. The difference is, I think people are more or less settled at that age for the most part. The difference is that here we have the ability to actually to cross metaphors, to sneak into that pizza parlor and change the channel, once in a while. Mm-hmm. And so that, like, people look up and they're like, wait a second, that's not Fox News. What is that? And that's also what was nice about radio too, is that sometimes people are like, it's a commercial, turn the dial, but there's no presence. Right. On radio. So that is it. And so I appreciate the call, because on some level that, validates this theory. I mean, in my mind, thanks for the call, but the different YouTubers, different shows have different roles in the left ecosphere. And, partly you settle on that based upon what you're interested in, and then after a while, what you're good at and what you're finding success at. And when, here's an email I got yesterday from listener James. Just wanted to write a quick thank you for your content, especially the clips I first stumbled across on libertarianism, Dave Rubin and Ben Shapiro. I thought my perspective might be helpful for further shedding light on these guys and what their followers think. I came across Shapiro as part of the Never Trumper movement. I wanted to vote conservative because of pro-life issues, pretty much exclusively. I found Shapiro when he came out against Trump for the guy's plainly immoral character. I think that move gave him a ton of credibility at the time, together with leaving Breitbart, especially with evangelicals. And as a result, I was casually listening to him since the election. Over the last year, however, I thought it was becoming more and more obvious how slippery he was being about manipulating his former positions. And basically, whenever Shapiro says, as I say, you can tell he's about to lie and stretch his prior positions. And he goes on, I'm grateful for your content. And honestly, Vic Berger's for making it clear when these guys dance around their positions. I'm honestly surprised. And so this is another example of, like, the efficacy of that. There are other shows, it's not worth it. I mean, they're doing something different, but, on some level, I'm quite convinced that for a long time, I mean, less so because he's where he's positioned himself now, but a guy like Rubin or Sam Harris is a gateway to the right. Right. And on some levels, on that spectrum, I want to be a gateway to the left. Mm-hmm. And, one of the ways you do it is you just, like, basically insert yourself into the stream of information that people are getting.
Mm-hmm. And pick fights with them, because then they respond to you, and then someone, they'll feature your response on their show, and then suddenly someone on the right who may not be aware of your show gets you have a better argument, frankly. So suddenly brains start cracking open, and they have much larger audiences for the most part. I mean, that's the scary thing, as we all know, is that they're funded, they're organized.
I mentioned yesterday, Ben Shapiro's views on Facebook are like dwarf CNN and the New York Times combined. Yeah. And that is a function, I am quite convinced, of enormous amounts of advertising.
Right.
And probably some bots and some gaming of the thing. And because the way they're funded, there is a willingness by their funders to lose money.
That's right.
And that's because their agenda is
and I mean, one good reason to have Facebook under some sort of public oversight, whether you call it nationalizing or whatever, is that we would have insight into, is this about the algorithm or is this about like a payola situation? Right. Why are 55 million people seeing Ben Shapiro's dumb comments? Right? Like, it'd be nice to know exactly what that is. Is it the algorithm?
Or
is he just that popular?
I mean, I am also, I am in the camp of like, I just don't think you can nationalize things like that, because I think it just brings up all sorts of problems. But I think if you break that company into a bunch of smaller pieces and do not allow them to have the market dominance, Ben Shapiro can win on Facebook. But if that means only like 7 million views and there's other places.
Well, wouldn't they have to get rid of video then? Wouldn't that be what breaking up that means?
No. Breaking up that means that, like, look, because of the way that they target, because of their aggregating Instagram, because they have all this data, Facebook is looking constantly to maximize their profit. And so you're allowing multiple different data streams to converge, and so that you're controlling the universe. And if they don't have control of the universe, then someone like, it doesn't matter if it's pay to play. Like, it doesn't matter if Ben Shapiro is huge on what is that right-wing Twitter, Flub or Dab or whatever it is. Gab. And it doesn't matter, right? Like, I mean, that's fine. It's just that they can game the system with Facebook because Facebook profits off of people gaming it.
Right.
And that is part of the problem. I mean, if you nationalize it, right, then I don't know I'm not even sure what nationalizing it means in this context.
But it's not realistic. I mean, it's just not going to happen.
I don't know if anything's going to happen, but from a theoretical standpoint, then you're getting into a lot of like First Amendment rights that I think are become very dodgy. And then who
owns the data?
A government agency that is going to. But my argument is you don't collect the data, because if it's not profitable for you to do, if it's not a profit venture,
right,
that data is irrelevant.
I don't even just mean data like about people's lives, not like, they have the dating app now, they have the marketplace. I'm not even talking about that data. I mean just the content, like having the messages of who's monitoring the messages. Suddenly it's the government, Facebook. I mean, I don't trust either one of them, but it's very real. And
I would be concerned with having the government have control over it. What I would like to do is make them a player so that they don't have as much, there's not as much control vested there.
There just needs to be, proper oversight. And I think that what you're saying about being a monopoly enterprise, what are you, a marketplace? Or are you, whenever they're getting attacked, they use one of their aspects of the form as the excuse. So, we're not journalists. We're actually a marketplace. Oh, we're not a marketplace. We're actually a free speech platform. Like, what is it?
That's like the game that Limbaugh would play. Like, I'm an entertainer. I'm not providing any news. I'm just a jag-off comedian. You can't take anything I say seriously, even though that's the only thing I'm very serious. Here is Robin Reno. Looks to me like both campaigns are after the white boomer woman vote.
That's right.
Biden's ads are like pharmaceutical commercials during The View when Gammy can still ride a bike playing mini golf. Trump simply plays to their extensive racisms. Honestly, for boomer white women, it's a draw. But doesn't Biden's entire campaign feel like a boomer movie where some old dudes
can still rob the bank or fly the shuttle or some dumb crap. But in the end, they get to kiss the girl and still show the young kids how it's done. There's like a sort of like a Walter Matthau, George Burns quality to the whole enterprise. They, of course, I think we're a silent generation, but that I understand the sentiment.
A buddy movie.
I mean, look, if Biden can win older voters, that's a real problem for Donald Trump.
He basically needs to win. I think looking at the numbers from last week, he needs to win a solid majority of boomer white women and just enough of a majority of boomer white men. And like, you know, if you look at Biden's ads, like the Corvette thing where he was looking at cleaning up his Corvette and doing this. I mean, that wasn't targeted at us. That wasn't targeted at progressives. And progressives get mad, angry, rightfully so, that this is what he's messaging on. But it's because he's speaking to this like little tiny chunk of voters that are extremely expensive. I mean, the amount of money that they're putting per voter, and it's a very small group of people that are, frankly, very unreliable. Like, that's what drives me crazy. It is cheaper to reach your base, but God forbid you actually move on a small set of issues that would anger your donors who are just, it's just like, you know, pain.
Well, I don't think it's just donors, frankly. I mean, look, if Hillary Clinton could get away with 55 buy into Medicare, Joe Biden could.
Right.
I think it's like their whole game plan is we're going to give Donald Trump nothing to work with. Nothing. We're going to be we're going to have such rounded edges on all our policy positions that it's going to be impossible to define us. And all it's going to be left is I'm a good guy. First off, the Corvette doesn't work with me because I'm a IROC Z guy. That's it. Period.
What?
Number one cruising car in Worcester.
You're not the target audience yet.
I know.
You're almost
pretty
there.
Pretty close.
You're almost there.
Meanwhile, it is primary day in Massachusetts today.
Yes.
We talked about Kennedy doing the adding the H to the Worcester thing. That was. God. Do you know that the Worcester Airport, the 3-letter symbol for the Worcester Airport, do you know what it is? Fucking enraging.
What is it?
WOO.
I think it's the only time I've ever sworn on this show. It's so enraging to me.
What is it?
ORH.
I mean,
There's
it's
no
amazing
H in Worcester.
I can't believe they have an airport. That's crazy.
Well, it barely operates. I don't even know. Like sometimes, like there's no airplanes that fly out of there.
It's private
They
jets.
built it on a hill, and it's always foggy.
Oh my gosh!
So
it's like an empty city bike.
It's honestly exactly. It's like Worcester. Worcester has some challenges, but it is the heart of the Commonwealth, and the Paw Sox moving there, so it's the Woo Sox. But they call them the Woo Sox. It's not Worcester. It's Worcester.
Do you think he's been there?
Huh?
Do you think that Kennedy's been there?
To Worcester?
Yeah, that's insane. I mean, seriously, that is
it's
huge,
the second biggest city in New England.
Fail. That is an insane fail. Like, fire your people now.
It was in the Worcester Telegram.
Unreal, and they should have caught it, or they didn't want to. Who knows?
It's not our job to proofread your stuff. You're a Kennedy. I mean, come on, guy.
You went to a lot of Harvards.
Yeah, I mean, look at, dude. You think you're so great? I mean, how come you can't spell Worcester? All right.
What do you think's going to happen? What I mean, for real, like you're from there.
I think Markey's going to win, and I don't know what's going to happen with Morse. I hope he wins.
Yeah,
I really do. I mean,
this would be the first.
I don't think. Listen, my sense is that Morse is going to be a progressive upgrade from Richie Neal. He's not going to be. Exactly. He's not going to be AOC. No. He's not going to be even Mondaire Jones, but he's going to be a semi-reliable ally to them. He's going to be more like old school progressive caucus, I think, and maybe a little bit on the left, a little bit because he knows that's where his bread is buttered. Now, it could surprise me either way, but
so what makes him not as progressive?
The value is getting Richie Neal out.
Because, so what makes him that way, though? I mean, he's a very popular mayor. Young people love him in the city. In the city, in his town. Oh, yeah. So what what specifically?
I think
makes
he's
him
Medicare
not
for
so-
all,
right?
Which is I consider that a staple of a progressive.
Yep.
And that to me is like, I mean, frankly, if
Where
you
could we
vote
push
for
him on once he gets elected, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, if you vote for Medicare for all, and that's the only thing that you do for the most part, I mean, obviously there's other issues, but I think like you're talking about a huge portion of our economy. And I think the experience of, we just were talking about like, what is a gateway to the left, from a media standpoint. I think living in a country with Medicare for all will fundamentally change the way that people perceive government.
Absolutely.
Because I spent 30 years ago, I spent a little time in Australia for, I don't know, almost a year. And I almost the only thing I can remember from that trip is my experience going to the doctor. I had like an ear infection or something like that. And I was like, how am I going to navigate this? And I went in and I paid $20.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't on there.
You weren't, exactly. I told you I did that last year. I was in Greece and I tore two ligaments in my arm, and I went in, met with the surgeon directly. He sent me down the hall to go get an x-ray, came back with the x-ray, looked at it, gave me physical therapy, all within like an hour in the morning. And then when I went downstairs to pay, they were like, we're so sorry, we have to charge you. And I was like, well, how much? They're like, 30 euros. Like, I'll survive, thank you.
Like, I just think that experience is, and because of the universality of it, I think that would lock in a lot of change. But I also think that he would vote for the Green New Deal. I'm trying to remember the interview I had with him, but there was, basically the checklist. And
so what's the holdup? What could we push him to be more progressive on if he were elected? Like, why
I'm
do you
not
think
sure.
he's not?
I mean, I guess we'll find. I don't know how to the left that district is. There's, I mean, I think it's left, but I don't know. And, whatever. Richie Neal has had, I think part of it is like anybody's going to look better than Richie Neal, and that's just based upon how much money he gets from PACs, corporate PACs, and just on the Ways and Means. Like, I would rather Lloyd Doggett take over Ways and Means, and that in and of itself is enough for me to hope that happens. But
yeah, it's a strategic. I mean, that's the great thing about Justice Democrats is they were very thoughtful about who they targeted, how they targeted them to create a real difference. And it, and most of the candidates that they fully went in to support, with the exception of maybe Cory Bush, they were white men who just were like crusty and not present. And what was extraordinary about Cory's race is that she actually was running against somebody who was kind of, not hated, at least in the community. But she just really stepped up. So, yeah, we're rooting for Isan Lakey in Massachusetts 1st District, which is Joe Kennedy's old seat. She was a financial
There's like
regulator.
7 or 8 people running in that
There
race,
is,
right?
which means like all the polling that's come out, I mean, generally speaking, when you have that many candidates in a race, polling is like, you can't. So she has a real chance. We don't know. I mean, the polling was within a margin of error, and everyone's kind of locked in at the same. But she's really the most progressive candidate, not taking any corporate money at all.
So there's 3 big races there. It's Kennedy's replacement. It's going to be the Markey Kennedy thing, and I think Markey might, if the polling is accurate, then I think he's going to win. And my understanding too is that Kennedy ran for this seat because he sees the writing on the wall, and if Warren leaves to go into the administration, or if another seat opens up, or even 6 years from now, Markey, it's just the era of a white guy winning is that door is going to shut a little bit. I mean, it's just not going to be the sort of the slam dunk that it was before. And you're going to have people like Ayanna Pressley. She's, I would be very surprised if she is not the next senator, whoever it is going to be next opening in Massachusetts.
He seems to be playing it like Martha McSally did in Arizona, where she ran against Sinema, lost, then ran again. Oh my God, who she ran against last time? I can't even remember. And she,
right, like if Warren gets appointed, then he tries to run for that seat. But we'll see. I don't know. I think Baker gets a pick, fills it for a little bit, but who knows? I don't know if Warren will go into the administration. I don't know what job she would want.
When is Baker up for re-election?
I don't know.
What kind of Massachusetts?
They love Baker in Massachusetts. There's a long history of that in Massachusetts. The liberal Republican.
Yeah.
Brooks, Perlstein was talking about, Senator Brooks. I think he was the second African American ever elected to the Senate. Is that right? And he was a Republican. Massachusetts Republican, Edward Brooks.
Interesting. Second.
Okay, so just this update. New York City has delayed the opening of their schools. The remote teaching will start a week later than they had anticipated, and the in-school hybrid, the way that New York City and look, this is the biggest school district in the country that is going to have, I think California, I think LA is number one, but the biggest that's going to have any in-person teaching in the country. And it also has one of the lowest infection rates in terms of like a city, a big city.
As of now.
Right now I think the positive rate is somewhere around like 0.6%, which is very low. The R naught is something like 0.93 or 95, I think. Changes every day, 93, 94, 95, somewhere around there, which means that each person who has COVID is transmitting it to less than one person. And the teachers were going to go on strike because they can't get into the building until I think in a couple of days. Mm-hmm. And school's supposed to start in less than a week, in-person teaching.
Right.
And teachers needed more time. Principals needed more time. And people should be aware that there are, I think it's like 150,000 kids in the New York. There's like 1.4 million kids. If these are just numbers off my top of my head, so they may be a little bit off. I think like 140,000 kids are homeless who go to school there. There's
prior to COVID.
This is prior to COVID. Yeah.
Right.
100, I think like something like 700,000 get free lunch from the school system. And so there's a lot of pressure. De Blasio, I don't think has handled this particularly well, but there's a lot of pressure on him to get the schools open, although part-time, I don't know what that's supposed to do, frankly. Yeah. But I would have done it very differently. But the teachers were going to strike. I think de Blasio basically said, okay, we're going to open it up. It could have been, on some level, it could have been a strategy from the beginning, get people to think the deadline is here, and then they get an extra week or two, actually, in terms of like, I think it's 2 weeks delay on in-person, and then they're going to start the week. But in Florida, they don't pay attention to any of this. They don't care about COVID. They're all superhuman. There were 9,000 new COVID cases among children 15 days, within 15 days of their schools opening in Florida. And that number, I think, was from a couple of days ago because I think they opened up in like the first week of August. I've got friends who they're teachers, and their people are all just terrified of going back into school, but I think it's all in person. Here's Ron DeSantis saying, like, I don't care. Here he is.
I think that we understand what we need to do, but we will never do any of these lockdowns again. And I hear people say they'll shut down the country, and honestly, I cringe because we know places that have done that. The most draconian lockdown in the world has been Peru, military enforced since March. They have the highest per capita mortality in the world from COVID.
Now, there's things called causal connect. There's a causal and a correlation a problem here. I don't think that the highest number of deaths have taken place because there is a draconian lockdown. That may have happened because there was the highest number of per capita deaths. Let us hope that in Florida, somehow, children are isolated from people who are older so that we do not see an increase, dramatic increase in deaths because of this. The only places where in-school teaching has been sustainable are when the community spread is already very diminished. So New York has a chance. We'll see. If you fly into New York now, it's not rigorous, but it happens. You're supposed to tell people where you come from, and if you've come from just about any state outside of New England, you've got to basically sign in with the whatever county you're going to with the public health, and they send you an email every day or a text saying don't be a jerk, quarantine, and I'm sure that has some help. And I got a test yesterday. I got the results back within 24 hours, which it also took about 24 hours for my nose to feel normal again.
Right.
But I'm negative. But
congratulations.
That's great. But then they punt the school thing, so I'm going to probably have to do it again soon.
My mom has been in town, and she came from Arizona, and she did not get the follow-up calls, which is really concerning because we've been hearing this, but she's like, they didn't take her. This is in New York, in LaGuardia. They didn't take her form, which is what I had to go through. And another friend who just came in from another state had to go through that. This is 2 weeks ago. They did not do that. So I don't know what's changing and how fast, how much of it is just a campaign to kind of instill fear in people. On the other hand, I have a friend who was supposed to fly back to school in Paris 2 days ago and they refused to put him on the plane because he didn't get the test in the required period of time before getting on the plane. So the stuff is changing really fast, and it's very confusing for folks. It's not as easily available as it should be based on where you're going, and it seems like people aren't communicating with each other. And I think the concern with Florida is you're going to school, but what are the parameters? People are in Miami saying different things than people in Fort Lauderdale.
Well, that's the problem because we have no national response.
Exactly.
And we have some governors who are hostile to just even a consistent state response.
Yeah.
Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 215 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 215.
Hey, Sam. It's Mindy. How are
Mindy!
You?
How are you, Mindy?
Hi. I'm good. I have two stories. I have a really funny story about you. Do you want to hear that? Or not? I have a Debbie Downer story.
Maybe give us the Debbie Downer. Wait a second. I just got bumped.
Uh-oh. Sam.
Yeah. Sorry. Mindy.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, as soon as, okay. Why don't you do the...
want to hear the funny story or the Debbie Downer story first?
Let's do the Debbie Downer, and then we can end on an up note.
All right, because the high note's good. Okay, my neighborhood where I live in Bucks County, no signs out. It's completely polarized. I cannot even tell you if it's going Democrat or Republican. There's no lawn signs. There's a spattering of Trump signs, a few, and one or two Biden signs, and everybody's staying locked down. So last time with Clinton, I had 400 signs on my lawn, and my neighbor had Trump signs, and my other neighbor had signs. There's no signs anywhere.
All right, let me ask you this.
Anywhere.
Let me ask you this. 2018, was there signs?
Yeah. There was a lot of signs, on the little dirt roads and stuff, getting up. Yeah, there was. There's no signs. There's some Brian Fitzpatrick signs, farmers for Brian Fitzpatrick, but other than that
could be COVID-y too.
There's no field offices.
It's so hard.
A lot of it, yeah.
So hard to assess based on signs, frankly. But
nobody's talking about it. You go to Wawa here, and nobody's talking about it. The nail place, there's no chatter at all. I mean, people are definitely dug into their camp, and they're not revealing it to anybody who they're voting for. So I don't know what's going to happen here. So I just want you to know, and I'm not just talking about my little borough. I'm talking about all of Bucks County Pennsylvania, like, because we drive around a lot because, COVID, we're bored. So we drive around. There's not a lot going on here, not that I can see.
All right. Is that the
I'll
downer?
keep you posted on that.
Okay. I'm not taking that as a downer. I'm taking that as like sort of a neutral comment.
Yeah, it's a neutral comment. So I wanted to call you 2 weeks ago about this when it happened, but you were on vacation and then your lives were busy. So during the post office thing, I'm an eBay seller. That's what I do full time. eBay seller for 12 years. And
I did not know that, Mindy. What do you sell?
You didn't know. What?
What do you sell? I had no idea.
I sell anthropology and Free People clothing.
Oh.
What?
Domestic.
The store.
She knows the line, right? Do you know the line?
Yes. Anthropology.
Free People, anthropology, Urban Outfitters.
Wait, how do you sell their stuff?
Oh my God, I don't want to get into that. That's why I'm calling you.
Okay, we'll talk about that later.
For a whole other day. I've been doing it for 11 years, and we're really good sellers. I used to have a store. I was an interior designer. Anyway,
okay.
My life story is not what I'm talking about. So I've been on eBay for 11 years, and all the customer service people, you can't get through customer service since Corona. You have to email them. But I'm in a special division called concierge because I've been on there so long and my rating's so high and I do a lot of volume that if you call them, they call you back. So they called me back. So I was on hold like last 2 weeks ago because a lot of my packages are getting delayed because of the post office.
Right.
And we have to upload the tracking and we have to have it scanned within 24 hours or else we get a defect. So there's a big shitstorm going on eBay with all the packages being late and all the sellers are freaking out.
Okay.
So it's messing everything up. So we have to call, we have to get the defect removed, eBay's like incurring all the fees and eBay's like giving everybody refunds and eBay's like losing a lot of money because of the guarantees. Anyway, so I was on hold, so I called and it was 45 minutes wait and I hung up. And it was during your show, and I was watching your show, and then they called me back, and I said to the girl, Katie, hold on, I have to lower my podcast. And she said, what podcast are you listening to? I said, I don't want to mix business with pleasure. This is not like, I can't mix my job, but it's a political one. And she goes, which one? And I said, Majority Report. And she goes, oh my God, I love Sam. He's so gorgeous. I love him. It's my favorite podcast.
Wow.
You should have a calendar, Sam.
What? So she goes,
Sell it on
eBay. My
eBay.
God, he's so gorgeous. He's so gorgeous. I love him. I'm a Democrat. And then she goes, this is the funniest part. Well, that was adorable. But then she goes, oh my God, are you Mindy?
Wow. That's awesome.
She goes, are you the Mindy?
Oh my God.
Seriously? You have to ask me, can't you hear my like Jewish accent voice? And she like was laughing hysterical. So I told her 2 weeks ago that I would give a shout out to Katie in customer service in the eBay concierge. And she just was so starstruck that I met you and I knew you and that I love your show and that I'm Mindy and it was just adorable.
That's a great story.
That's amazing.
Thanks.
Is that a good story?
That's a good story.
We're famous.
Well,
I'm not. I mean, you're famous. I'm not. I'm just me. But
well,
you're famous.
Well, I think we're equally famous, Mindy.
And that is adorable. No, we're not equally famous. I'm just a housewife. But anyway, that's the story. So I thought you'd like that. But I really, everyone thinks you're very.
Oh, well, thank you, Mindy. That's very sweet. That's very sweet. Thank you, Katie. Appreciate it. All right, Mindy. Thanks for the call.
And that's it. I don't know what's going on in Bucks County. I'll keep you posted.
All right, keep us posted. That is it for our calls today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Katie. Maybe I should be getting into eBay now that I have an in with the concierge service.
Yeah.
So.
Do they mail things too? They're the ones who facilitate all that? That's a great tool.
I don't know. I don't understand how. Like, all I understand is that my daughter sells all the clothes I buy her on Depop. That's the only thing I understand.
I don't even know what that is.
It's like she thinks she's a businesswoman, and her business model is have dad buy me stuff,
and then I sell it, and look at all the profit I'm making.
Is she selling it for more or less?
It doesn't matter. Is she selling it for more than she paid for it? Because I'm buying it.
At least it's cash. I mean, it's COVID. What is she going to do? Like,
I don't know.
Start a store or something?
I don't know.
There are worse things she could be doing online.
That's true.
I think we
That's
know.
True.
Yeah.
That's true. All right. Couple IMs and way out of here. A silver ball stud in hindsight, pretty much what we have expected for the last autumn of a Trump first term. They're terrified the Dems might actually have their base energized. It's not sexy, but the Biden vote has become exponentially more important than I admit I thought the Kerry vote or the Obama second term was. Centrists will be plenty happy to blame the left for the loss and move further right in Trump too. Going to join my local Socialist Rifle Association as well, though. Pragmatic progressive. I really think the progressive podcasts are doing a bad job of highlighting some of the really progressive pieces of Biden's platform. For instance, taxing capital gains at the same level as allowing tax credits for rent payment. Lifting the cap on Social Security taxes, the public option, which is a major change to health care. We have to highlight these. It's really important to highlight these policies in contrast with Trump. Biden is a net positive. KY a net neutral. KY.
I think it's their burden to do that first, not our burden. I mean, we should be pushing him left. Even in this election, I think we should push him left to make the case as to why progressives have a better opponent. But, I mean, giving him candy because of the public option, come on.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm not right. I mean, I think, look, the bottom line is people should be voting against Donald Trump. And there's only one candidate to vote against Donald Trump. I just... To tell people, I think all the things that you're talking about are good, but these are baseline things. Hillary Clinton was more to the left on a lot of these things than Biden was.
Yep. Including education, by the way.
It's not a question of giving him credit. It is a question of, like, he has met the baseline expectations of what you should have for a moderate Democrat. And I am perfectly happy to engage anybody who wants to say that somehow they're not voting is going to help further progressive goals. I think that's not the case. But I'm also not going to say, oversell Joe Biden. The bottom line is it is better, materially better for a vast majority of the cohorts of this country that certainly progressives, care about helping, to have Joe Biden in office, period, end of story. I mean, there's no other. It's not, so I don't think that job that you're talking about is that relevant, to be honest with you.
You mean the job of highlighting his progressive platform? First off, I'm sorry. I'm not in the camp of Bernie Sanders. It is not that progressive. It is 2020. Like you said, the bare minimum should be Medicare for all. The fact that we're even giving him kudos for public option, we're not reversing in time. This isn't 1988. That's what Donald Trump wants us to do. Donald Trump wants us to be having a 1988 debate over law and order. And Biden is kind of like responding that way, which is where we should put pressure on him. But moving forward, having a Biden presidency means very likely having a Kamala Harris presidency means very likely that we can pressure Kamala because she's just younger and has to respond to a much younger base that is much more left, radically left, and even on the middle level, like you're like a moderate to young people.
Right. I mean, the Kamala Harris on day one of her vice presidency has to figure out how she's not going to get primaried from the left.
Exactly.
And that's it. That's her job. And to a certain extent, she's not going to not be able to get primary from the left if Joe Biden is too far to the right.
Exactly.
And so, that's where her energy is going to go. Now, again, her not getting primary to how she calculates what I need to do to not get primary from the left, but still be palatable to the center or whatever. I mean, who knows? But I just think that overselling the progressive bona fides of Joe Biden is just not a valuable endeavor to even getting him elected. No. You're just not going to convince any progressives, and I think with good reason, that he is going to bring about enough progressive change to satisfy them. What you can say, and I think this is true, is that you're going to have material benefits for people. If you are an immigrant, if you're DACA or DAPA, you're going to be better off under Joe Biden, undoubtedly. And there's a whole host of things that are going to be marginal improvements, but you're also going to stop the just bloodletting that is going on. And you're going to give yourself a toehold, the left, if they continue to push and continue to organize and continue to do all the things that they did during the Trump administration, during the Obama administration, and grow bigger. And we can knock out a couple of like the leadership. I think, part of it is also time and just sort of like there's a certain trajectory that's happening. But Donald Trump, a second term for Donald Trump, will make progressive change in this country. It will set it back decades, I think. Decades.
No, it'll be the end. I mean, it's basically saying we're not going to do anything about climate change, which literally, like, we'll
and
have...
you're going to have, you could get 3 Supreme Court justices that will be in their 40s. 2 of them will turn from a left seat to a right seat. But you'll have, these will be people in their 40s, and they will be there for 30, 40 years. And it doesn't matter. You can pass Medicare for all, but they could turn around and say, like, sorry.
Rule against it, exactly.
People have to understand, we're already living with this dynamic. You have a Senate that is dominated by the minority of the population in this country. And just even coming in and on day one saying, restore the Voting Rights Act. And, now they're not going to do this on day one because it's going to take the days for obstruction to come up there so that Chris Coons can feel comfortable getting rid of the filibuster. And then day one, it's your stimulus. You got your statehood for D.C. and you got your fix on the Voting Rights Act. And then you give statehood to D.C.
Right.
You've empowered the left. Not the far left, but you've empowered like you're putting more weight on the left side of the spectrum. All right. Couple more of these IMs that we'll get out here. Lefty Lib, Libertarian area code 607. They left.
Basically, you should just answer any phone call from San Francisco.
Libertarians are quiet because they're not libertarians. They were and have always been pseudo-fascists, if not outright fascists. Doctor from New Jersey. Ben Shapiro is popular because people miss Alvin and the Chipmunks. Okay, Trump change. I was on the fence with Biden, but Fox and friends have reassured me that'll be a reliable lefty. Go, Joe. That's basically how I reacted when Reverend Wright's stuff came out.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, I'm going to vote for Obama now. West Ass Pizza. To continue the metaphor, I think it's like Majority Report is hiding in the basement of a pizza parlor. All right. Maldice. I just became a member because I really need you guys to keep my hope alive. Give you one of these. Thank you. 3 more. Chadius Stevens. Dave Rubin just bought a huge house. Interestingly, he bought it in radical California, not in freedom-loving state like Texas or Mississippi, which he threatened to go to all the time. Right. So
I feel like he might have planted that story.
What, that he bought this?
Yeah, I know it's in California, so it's in like close to San Francisco, so it's embarrassing or something to him, but I think he still probably planted it.
Right. How do we know that he bought a house?
Yeah.
Well, you can look it up.
Yeah, but who's looking up?
Somebody.
Exactly.
You have an
somebody
audience.
says, I think that somebody got a tip to look something up, maybe.
Yeah.
Right.
Who cares? I should tell you that tomorrow we're having another problem. What's his name, Brendan?
Stuart Stevens.
A never Trumper.
Yeah.
The only never Trumper I'll have on. We'll see how,
How did you get it? How did you make it happen? We tried to get some on last week. I couldn't get any. Yeah, I tried to get a few. They were too busy. They're just like hanging out in MSNBC green rooms. That's
book
the
where
angle.
he says it's all a lie, and so that's he's the only one I would invite on, where he's basically disavowing every Republican position that is taken.
Right.
But still, there's going to be issues. All right, 2 more, and then we're out of here. Swarthartha, is it really surprising that the Democratic Party is focusing on reaching people who actually vote? No, but I think the problem is that, like, the fact that they vote is great, but the Clinton campaign reached a ton of people who voted in Pennsylvania. It's just that 25% of them voted for Trump.
Exactly.
So, it's one thing to say, like, we should go where there are fish, but it defines how you say there are fish, because if these are fish that will only strike one type of lure and you keep casting in this pond, it doesn't matter how many fish are there.
The other thing is, it's not a resource question. It's not like either or. They have the money. First off, there are like no offices anywhere. You want to know why there are no signs in Bucks County? Because there's no field offices where people collect their signs. So there's no actual money being spent on the ground. So they could be investing in multiple places at once.
It's not just a question of resources. It's like almost like psychic. It's a profile.
Yeah.
They don't want to be perceived as, they don't want to give Trump anything to latch onto.
Exactly.
But I think that's short-sighted. But who knows? It could work.
I urge people to go back and watch the debate between Biden and Sarah Palin. I mean, she was so kooky in that debate, and I'm not saying she has the same personality as Donald Trump by any means, but he really, people mock how I think he's actually a pretty solid debater when he's, whatever caffeine he has to take, whatever he did in that last debate where everyone thought he was going to fall asleep. Go back and watch that debate, because I don't know. I mean, he may be able to handle Trump in a way that hits the mark.
Champagne Communist, I think Trump is onto your dark shadow group, Sam. I would get with your DNC handlers right away so they can cut loose ends before they're able to connect them to the Clintons. Joyce from PA, Stuart Stevens still defends bald-faced lies he promoted as part of Mitt's campaign. Hey, if you got stuff you want me to question Stuart Stevens about, send me an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com. I will definitely, I will take any of that info you can. It would be great. And final IM of the day. Bear at home, me too. As far as the bet with Pacman, I don't have any bet. Will you be giving a heads up prior to the sun's out, buns out? Nothing personal, but I'll need to miss that event. First of all, there's no sun's out, buns out. It was sun's out, guns out. But the sun is gone now. It's September, and I didn't bet anything with David Pacman.
Oh, okay.
It's not a competition, particularly if it's one I'm going to lose. Nomi, thank you so much. Good show. Matt, Brendan, thanks, guys. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the